The 19th of May 2019 is a day drowning in infamy, as this was the day that Cleaved, the final episode of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, was released. Along with this other lesser-known TV show. Star vs. the Forces of Evil used to be one of my favorite modern cartoons around 6 to 7 years ago. I don't think it's considered modern at this point, but whatever. Granted, I was still fairly young back then, but there's a reason it developed a pretty large fan base outside of its target demographic. There was something pretty special about the first 2 seasons of Star. Though it wasn't near the same level as some of the other popular story-driven cartoons of the time, like Gravity Falls, Adventure Time, and Steven Universe, it was still a very entertaining show with incredibly charming characters and a story that gradually developed more layers, with some honestly intriguing lore. In fact, I maintain to this day that Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a good show overall. But I say overall for a reason. If it was just the first 2 seasons, I'd unironically say this was one of Disney's best shows without question. But there's a reason why a lot of people nowadays tend to write off the entire show as being bad or mid or whatever. Seasons 3 and 4 of Star vs., well, mostly 4, are incredibly polarizing for many due to the frustrating writing decisions, rushed storytelling, completely losing its mind when it came to the romance and shipping, and even for people who like seasons 3 and 4, it has a conclusion that the vast majority agree is just straight up awful. So awful, in fact, that it's tainted the reputation of the show entirely for the past 5 years. But this video isn't about the ending. Lord knows you've heard me poke fun at it plenty on this channel, it's become a bit of a running joke at this point. You read the title. To commemorate the 5th year anniversary of the show's finale, I decided to rewatch Star vs. from the very beginning and rank every single episode. And I know what you're thinking, but doesn't the show only have 77 episodes? And technically you're right, but considering the vast majority of Star episodes are comprised of 2 11-minute segments and there are only a handful of full 22-minute episodes, this number jumps all the way up to 140 episodes across all 4 seasons. This is probably gonna take a while, so grab your hot chocolate, grab your chicken noodles, grab your blahaj, but only if you're cool. Let's get started. As far as first episodes go, Star vs. the Forces of Evil has it pretty damn good. Star is the happy-go-lucky princess of the butterfly family who rule over the dimension known as Muni and is exiled to Earth so she can learn how to use the royal magic wand. While on Earth, she befriends Marco and moves in with his family, and together they fight off monsters from her dimension led by Ludo, this guy, who have come to Earth to steal her wand. Very simple premise, obviously, and that's one of Season 1's greatest strengths, simplicity. Most shows tend to have a pretty rocky beginning as they get their bearings and carve an identity for themselves, but honestly, and this may be a divisive opinion, I think Star's first season is the most consistent one by a long shot, and it's definitely helped by how incredibly strong of an opening this is. While obviously a lot less narratively and thematically complex as the show would later become, there's a lot of joy to be had when a simple idea is done incredibly well like this. The show is incredibly energetic and charming, never taking its foot off the gas for more than a second, and as an introduction to the 2 main leads, it couldn't possibly be more perfect. Star and Marco have a ton of great chemistry together, gelling super well with each other, especially during fight scenes, and you really buy that these two are friends. I personally think it'd be more interesting if they stayed friends, but I'll stop being a dick now. The art and animation are also super nice to look at. The lighting and colors really pop, and the characters are all super expressive, which adds a lot to the charm. And while these aren't the most impressive fight scenes you've ever seen, they're incredibly fluid and still pretty fun to watch. I really like episode 1, and I can't think of many things wrong with it. It's simple and effective. It's still fun to this day. This episode introduces us to Star's second best friend, Princess Ponyhead, the disciple of Mephistopheles, as they hang out and travel across different dimensions where Ponyhead tries to do away with Marco, feeling like she's being replaced. This episode suffers from a common problem you'll see throughout the show, where the episode itself is really fun and I have no real issues with it, but Ponyhead is in it. To Season 1's credit, she is a lot more tolerable here than she is later in the show, and her going back to save Marco and learning to respect him and Star's ability to have more than one friend was nice to see, but she really is the absolute worst and my patience wears thin whenever she's on screen. She's just so annoying. Still, it's not enough to ruin what ends up being another entertaining adventure across dimensions. It's also the first episode to properly introduce us to the dimensional scissors and the dimension hopping antics found in future episodes. In an effort to convince Miss Skolnick to give her a better grade, Star attempts to cast a spell to get her the perfect date, only to accidentally turn her into a troll, which she stays as for the rest of the show despite Star's attempts to reverse the spell. Honestly, knowing what happens later in the show, it's nice to see them be more playful and casual when it comes to the concept of romance, as Star manages to match Skolnick up with one of Ludo's minions who speaks nothing but gibberish. I love how much of a full-on action show Season 1 is. While it does get a bit repetitive and predictable for every episode to end with a fight scene with Ludo and his army, they remain some of the most energetic and entertaining scenes in the show. Ludo's also just a really funny antagonist. Simple of course, but Alan Tudyk really sells how much of a loser he is while still making him oddly endearing as a bad guy. Also, Jackie's here. Jackie, get out of there! Okay, I promise I'll stop making jabs at least until we get to the Blood Moon Ball. Though seeing Star be completely on board with helping her best friend get along with his lifelong crush is incredibly sweet, if deeply ironic. Not a whole lot going on here, but the fast pace keeps things moving and stops the episode from getting boring. I might be in the minority on this, but School Spirit to this day is still one of my favorite episodes in the whole show. It's basically everything I love about season 1 contained within a borderline perfect package. There's really not anything wrong with this episode. Marco explains to Star that their school's football team gets destroyed every single year by the rival school, and Star, being as comically naive as she is, takes the destroyed part very literally and doesn't understand that it's just a game, spending the rest of the episode preparing for war until the penny drops for her as the game starts and she has to fix everything. I just love how completely committed to the misunderstanding Star is. It's probably the biggest example of her being a fish out of water in the entire series, and her hyperactive nature lends a lot to how over the top her preparations are. It's also generally one of the funniest episodes in the entire show. Nearly every joke got a laugh out of me, and even Marco's B-plot where he tries to prevent the opposing team from kidnapping his friend Ferguson, who's dressed as the school's mascot, was still super funny and had the same appeal that Star's plot did, with Marco taking things super seriously. And the moment where he finally goes to do something else and Ferguson immediately gets swiped always kills me. The ending is a straightforward action scene, but it's just absolute chaos and I love it. This is definitely one of the show's more chaotic episodes, and while it isn't as engaging as the more lore and story heavy episodes later on, I still think it's easily one of the show's best. There's just next to nothing wrong with it.
This is Knuckles, and I'm back.
Monster Arm frustrates me. Not in any way that affects the episode itself, mind you. Marco breaks his arm while doing karate training and asks Star to fix his arm using magic, and as you'd expect it doesn't go well and gives him a monster arm instead. Though Marco very quickly adjusts and plans to use the arm in his karate tournament against this puntable little and it becomes clear that the arm is pulling a venom and is having negative effects on Marco's mood and personality, and Star has to come to the rescue as it begins wreaking havoc on the dojo. It's a fine episode and all, still funny, well animated and executed well, but the monster arm itself is a massive red herring that I wish the show just didn't bother introducing, baiting the idea of it returning someday in a future episode and then completely dropping it in later seasons when the idea has a ton of potential. It's not a huge loss or anything, it's just a mild annoyance of mine I can't shake every time I revisit the episode. Star grows jealous and very suspicious of the Diaz family's close friend, Gustav, one of the previous exchange students to stay at their house. 1, for not getting the attention she used to receive before he stops by, and 2, because she thinks he wants to eat them. Of course, this isn't really the case, with Gustav apparently being from a really boring town in the middle of nowhere who dreams of becoming a chef to help spice up the depressing lives people lead there. Though he never explains why he was measuring the Diazes in their sleep, and I don't think the writers cared either, honestly. While there are some decent jokes here and Star's growing suspicions of him to the point of having a crime board connecting everything was fun, there's not a whole lot here worth talking about, and I tend to not rewatch this episode too much. It's not boring or anything, but it's also just there. Completely inoffensive, though I do still think about the ending sometimes. Is it supposed to imply that he's an exchange student from multiple families and just didn't explain it, or did he just really feed Star a whole pack of lies to prevent being caught? Look, I know it's a disguise, but I don't trust the French. Cheer Up Star is mostly just an episode about Star and Marco's friendship and showing how great their chemistry is, showing the lengths that both of them are willing to go to just to cheer each other up. It's sweet, it's wholesome, even if Marco accidentally ends up summoning Ludo and his army for the obligatory action sequence. Even though it's the point, Marco getting punked on by the entire world around him is something that gets old really quick, and there's only so much you can see the poor guy suffer before it gets tiring. I guess that does speak volumes as to how insanely likable Star and Marco are as characters, to the point where I hate seeing them go through stuff like this, so I guess that's a plus. There's really not much here, but it's a charming episode in its own right. Ahaha! Quest Buy, my beloved. This is our introduction to the titular Quest Buy, and while this ends up being a good episode, I resent it for the fact that Quest Buy is just a recurring place that the show has an episode take place in once per season, and the shtick gets tired really fast. Focusing on this Quest Buy episode though, it's fun, though I do feel there's a lot of missed potential given how good the idea itself is. Star loses her one charger, something that is never brought up again, and in all honesty is really fucking stupid, but I digress, and that's why she's in Quest Buy, and just so happens to be shot stopping at the same time as Ludo and his army, and with a wand that she can't use effectively, has to fight off Ludo's monsters as she and Marco race to find a new charger in time. Very fun episode overall, my complaints with the place itself aside, but given Quest Buy is supposed to be this gigantic magical version of Walmart, not Best Buy as you expect, I do mean Walmart, the place is massive, that has literally everything in the universe in stock, it really doesn't feel like it, and I wish they could have used this concept in a more creative way. Like, I don't know, actually using more of the unlimited stock of items on display would have made for some pretty interesting fight scenes, but the most we get is Marco tossing some stuff away because it isn't what he's looking for. This could have been a really creative episode, but instead it just settles for being a simple but still good and fun time, and thank God this stupid charger is forgotten about and doesn't show up later in the show. Star forgets to give Marco's parents an anniversary gift and quickly improvises a trip to Muni, and has to make sure not to be spotted returning from her exile by her dad, King River. The episode is alright, I guess. It's mostly just about keeping Marco's parents out of trouble as they take a tour through the most dangerous parts of Muni. It's still pretty funny, and finally getting to see Muni even for a little bit is interesting. Honestly, the best part of the episode was Star and River finally meeting, revealing that River isn't some stuck-up king and regularly goes out to fight monsters and goes on adventures to vent his frustrations. I'm not a fan of how later episodes would go on to Flanderize River into being a completely insane doofus, but I do like this side of River. Star realizing she inherited her fighting skills from him was sweet, and the two of them agreeing to not tell anyone they saw each other was pretty endearing and gave River a lot more depth than I expected him to have, even if in later episodes this side of him completely consumed him as a character. Overall, a fine episode. It was nice to see Star actually interact with her father in a way that's completely different to how she interacts with Moon. Brittany's party is super underrated. I think it's one of the season's best episodes, with Star and Marco showing up to Brittany, the popular girl's party, unannounced and seeing how miserable the whole experience is for everyone, with Star choosing to liven things up with her magic to Brittany's dismay. Also obligatory Ludo fight, but by this point that's expected. Star salvaging the party and making it incredibly fun for everyone while being completely oblivious to how much Brittany hates it is fun to watch, and while the episode is super straightforward, it never stops being entertaining. There's a lot of good jokes in this one, and I also get carsick easily when I move around, so I was feeling Marco's pain the entire time. Season 1 continues to be super simple and pretty easy to explain, which I like because it makes this video easier to write, but also it's just really easy to analyze how well Season 1 is at executing simple ideas and turning them into fun episodic adventures with a tiny bit of continuity, though this next episode is a little different to say the least. Star starts going through Muberty, Muni's version of puberty, and it ends up being a lot more eventful than the Earth version, causing her to transform and trap students into what subsists as she grows her Muberty wings. Generally, this episode is just really weird, though not in a bad way. Taking more of a horror angle, the Star's boy-crazed rampage was pretty interesting, and it does a decent job at being slightly unsettling. This is also the first episode to introduce us to Jenna, though only for a short while, and more importantly, Glossaric, the most unhelpful character in fiction. Glossaric is always funny, given he pretty much trolls the shit out of everyone with no discrimination, and I was surprised to remember that he doesn't really show up that much in Season 1, and I still find that wild given how important he is to the overall plot, but I guess that speaks volumes about how simple Season 1 is compared to the rest of the show, and for a first appearance, it does a solid job at introducing him and his antics. I think the really dramatic ending and Marco crying thinking Star had left for good was pretty silly, not even in retrospect, just in general, but I'd say this is still a good episode. Star's magic mirror runs out of minutes, because even other dimensions have to deal with awful data plans, and it turns out her specific provider happens to be psychotic pixies that force them to all work off their bill in the shard mines. Overall, not a very interesting episode, honestly. While the idea itself is a mildly funny twist on mobile data providers, the rest of the episode isn't exactly what I'd call stimulating. Ferguson's subplot of him falling in love with the Empress was funny, but I genuinely struggle to recall anything else of substance here beyond the escape sequence. I like Star being thrown in a scenario where she doesn't have to use her wand for a change. I guess that's something else I can give this episode. Yeah, I'd say this one is one of the weakest in the season, sorry. This was a cute episode about Ludo firing lobster claws, so Star and Marco help him adjust to life on Earth and try to steer him towards being a good guy, which goes about as well as you'd expect. Well, I should probably say that it's Marco trying to steer him towards being a good guy, because this episode gives us our first display of this show's wonderful racism allegory. Star is not very keen on monsters and vehemently denies that they're capable of any good, saying it's just in their nature to be awful and doesn't believe in monster claws for even a second. I have my issue of how this show handles its allegories, and I think in Season 3 onwards it's a too pack of ass. But this is the start of Star's arc where she realizes she's deeply bigoted and has been taught a hurtful mindset for her entire life. And later episodes will go on to show her fighting for the rights of monsters and equality between them and humans. And I really like this arc, though I'll talk about it more in a few episodes. For this episode though, it's kinda uncomfortable hearing Star just saying openly bigoted stuff about monsters, but that's just because I've watched the show in its entirety like 3 times now. Even though season 1 is simple, it's nice to see them laying the groundwork for future episodes like this. The episode itself is fine, funny in places, nice idea, it's good. Star begins randomly casting spells in her sleep and causing chaos, so Marco uses psychology to figure out what's going on. The episode hinges on Marco feeling useless due to how many times Star has saved his life in comparison to him saving her, and it ends on a nice scene of them realizing that as long as they have each other's backs, there's no need to get caught up in discussions about who saves who the most. It's a very cute episode, ignoring the actual reason why Star was casting spells in her sleep was because she was protecting herself from a runaway princess trying to steal her face. Jesus Christ. The jokes in this one are super charming. It's just fun to watch a more casual episode of these two just interacting with each other. That's probably why it's one of the lowest rated on IMDb, because not a whole lot happens in it, but this is a situation where the scenario and jokes do a lot of heavy lifting and I really enjoyed it. Princess Smooshy, I think her name is. Well, her being here is yet another setup for St. Olga's Reform School for Wayward Princesses. The episode kind of falls off a cliff by the time she shows up. Her plan is stupid, the show's aware it's stupid, she has a stupid gimmick, Star and Marco struggle to defeat her somehow, and Marco one-tapping her with his book was funny, but kinda makes you wonder why any of this was necessary. These are probably stupid complaints, the episode is good, I like it. You know, I used to think my mental illness didn't really affect me as a person, but like, okay, keep it simple. Blood Moon Bowl is a pretty great episode from start to finish. It's hardly the funniest or most action-packed or even the most entertaining episode of season 1, but it's a nice change of pace that focuses on the characters first and foremost, and has a great plot that, regardless of what it means for the future of the series, still stands out as one of the best written episodes of season 1. We finally meet Star's ex-boyfriend with anger issues, Tom, and the episode goes over his incredibly toxic ploy to try and get back together with her by inviting her to the Blood Moon Ball, a ceremony held every 667 years, yeah, nice save guys, and neglects to tell her that this ritual will bind their souls together for eternity. Marco steps in, going undercover, and dances with Star underneath the moonlight in one of the most iconic scenes in the whole show, saving Star from being paired with Tom for eternity, but unknowingly binding their souls together instead. Overall, the character work in this episode is really good. Even though Marco did save Star, her frustration with him not trusting her to handle herself and saying she needs a friend and not a hero was perfectly understandable. Tom is just the absolute worst for now anyway, and while his anger management problems are mostly played for laughs, it does a great job at showing how much of a toxic person and boyfriend he was. I like the slower pace of this episode compared to usual, and the atmosphere of the Blood Moon Bowl itself, dance included, was fantastic. If I had to criticize anything though, it would be that this was the turning point for Star and Marco's relationship going forward. A lot of people really liked that Star vs. started with the two of them being incredibly close friends and that the lead girl and boy of a Disney show had a platonic relationship, which is incredibly rare in a lot of shows and movies, especially Disney ones. And while I don't mind the concept of Star and Marco developing feelings for one another, on paper at least, I won't deny that a lot of what made our dynamic fun and interesting for many people was lost after this episode, even if it does take a good while for the ball to start rolling again and for their crushes to start getting in the way. Regardless, Blood Moon Bowl is one of the most important episodes of the whole show, and certainly one of the best of season 1. After the intensity of the previous episode, I have no problem with them immediately having a much more lighthearted adventure. However, this one is a little different than usual. The plot is simple for the most part. Star, being naive, believes that fortune cookies are actually legit, and begins to plan her life around everything they say, while Ludo and his army attempt to steal the wand. Classic Star vs. plot, and once again, it's a pretty funny and entertaining episode. What's different here though, is the show finally putting more of an emphasis on the ongoing plot, as this episode introduces us to one of the show's most fascinating characters, Toffee. Ludo looks for more monsters to hire after his latest defeat, and comes across a well-mannered, intelligent, and calculating lizard named Toffee who easily demonstrates that he's a cut above the rest, and also knows far more than he lets on. With Toffee's assistance and more patient approach to trying to nab the wand, Ludo almost succeeds, and is only thwarted at the last second due to his own incompetence. Toffee is a very effective villain, much more than Ludo, and his cryptic hints to his past, along with his severed finger, are undoubtedly intriguing. He has more planned than just being a random new hire for Ludo's army, and his introduction is so smoothly done. The episode manages to offer an entertaining story while also doing an incredibly good job at setting up future episodes and finally getting people hooked on the story. Freeze Day is yet another great episode. Star accidentally stops time using one of her spells, and after finding out she can't do anything to fix it, has to go to the planes of time and convince Father Time to get back on his wheel and get things moving again. The latter half of season 1 has a lot of fantastic episodes, and what helps is that they all manage to still be entertaining while delivering these great character moments, something I wished future seasons would do more of instead of just going all in on one or the other. It makes the plot and character progression feel much more natural. The scene where Marco stares at his memories of him and Jackie across his entire life, doing the exact same routine without ever moving their relationship forward, was a fucking gut punch and a perfect way to get Marco to finally take the next step, even if it's a small one. Star being Marco's unapologetic wingman is also always wholesome to see. Again, deeply ironic, but still. Father Time himself has a similarly depressing but funny sequence of him just running on the time wheel for eternity, and it really hammers in why he was being such a nuisance throughout the episode and knows any annoyances the audience may have of him. Not much else to say about this one, it's pretty great. This was certainly an episode that happened. River gets kicked out by Moon and decides to crash at Star and Marco's, and I do really like seeing Star and River being on the exact same wavelength for most of the episode, and their scenes bonded together, though very destructive and unhinged, were at least cute. River hasn't hit the point of being a completely obnoxious, insane Neanderthal yet, and by the end of the episode he realizes how obnoxious he's been and apologizes, so my issue is definitely not with River at all. The episode just really isn't that funny. Besides the running gag of Marco hating wet socks, I can't say the episode was that entertaining. Ludo isn't here for an action scene, which I feel is a bit of a missed opportunity given what the episode is about. I think it would have been fun if Star and River fought Ludo side by side to further tie into how Star gets her monster fighting side from him, and it would have been a good way for them to further bond and another way for River to make it up to Star for causing so much havoc. I'm only really going on about a potential missed opportunity because I don't really have much else to say here. Fine episode, just barely decent though. The first half an hour episode of the show, and it definitely makes a great first impression. Star and Marco infiltrate St. Olga's reform school for wayward princesses to break out Ponyhead so they can celebrate her birthday, and they find out all of Star's fears about the school, which were used as gags in previous episodes, were terrifyingly true, as the place is effectively a prison for princesses that seeks to remove all of their individuality and turn them into the polite ideal vision of what a princess is supposed to be through increasingly f***ed up psychological torture. I mean, the Clockwork Orange reference was not needed, but it definitely drives things home, all ran by Miss Heinous and her cyborg henchmen. Even though I've been impressed at how good the show is at writing 11-minute episodes and cramming them full of energy, they are so good at writing and structuring 22-minute episodes that I genuinely wouldn't mind if they kept doing that for every episode going forward. The high energy and fast pace is still here, but there's a lot more room for the plot to breathe, and for them to go further with the episode's ideas. Speaking of which, St. O's is wonderfully disturbing and I love it. It's not Invader Zim disturbing, friggin' SpongeBob rollercoaster.jpg in comparison, but it's still slightly off-putting. This is also one of the only episodes of the show where Ponyhead's presence isn't a downside. I actually quite like her here, and Marco causing all the princesses to rise up and start a revolution will never not be funny. This was another great episode. My only complaints are with Miss Heinous and her henchmen who go down so incredibly easy, it's a wonder no one started a revolution in this place sooner, given how everyone in here began as a rebellious princess. And to go on a brief tangent, fuck Miss Heinous, honestly. Not that it's a problem with the episode, but they really waste this character on some of the most pointless and brain-dead episodes going forward until like mid-season 3, and it really frustrates me, so stay tuned for that. Arguably one of the most important episodes across the entire series, Independence Day is the first major introduction to the show's racism allegory, showing how the historic violence and oppression of monsters on Muni has been portrayed as heroic and justified for centuries. Star only realizes how awful everything is because she's gathered her friends together to reenact the events of Independence Day, and it causes her to reflect on the years of bigotry and oppression she's been taught throughout her entire life. It makes her realize how badly oppressed the monsters really are. Now, I have a lot to say about this, so bear with me. The racism allegory itself, on paper, is perfectly fine, and dare I say it, is a pretty good idea, and the oppression of all monsters, regardless of how they act, is portrayed as wrong because, well, it is wrong. Oppression is cringe. However, throughout the entirety of Star Versus, there are multiple moments where monsters are consistently portrayed as these violent and dangerous beings that clearly pose a threat to normal everyday humans, which completely flies in the face of the message, especially when in future episodes with certain characters like Tom and Miss Heinous, their more negative and violent traits are inherently tied to their demon side and monster side. side. I'll get into this more when we get to season 3 and maybe 4, because in all honesty this is probably the best episode the show has where they tackle this subject, but future seasons are going to dramatically fumble this whole allegory despite the pure intentions, and I feel it's necessary to flag this for later because I get really upset when stuff like this isn't handled with the care it deserves. Episode itself is good though. It does a great job at showing the gradual build-up of doubt and shock as Star realizes what she's watching, and her lowering her wand at Buffrog to let him escape was a great moment. Also, Toffee is still making moves, possibly sabotaging Buffrog getting the wand, and he even convinces Ludo to kick Buffrog out entirely, showing how much control he has over Ludo now. Anyway, here's something funny about this episode. On Disney Plus in the UK, this episode along with the next one, the Bananagic Incident, are completely removed. And believe me, I know where your mind is going given what I just discussed, but it has nothing to do with the monster racism. It's actually entirely the next episode's fault. So, what was the reason for removing one of the show's most important episodes as collateral damage from this episode's screw-up? Allegedly, it didn't get past the censors in some countries and it never aired. I wonder why it would have possibly been... Sorry, monster racism, you were bordering on the edge of getting the show censored, but you can't stop the almighty power of dick jokes. Anyway, this episode, the Bananagic Incident, is one of the worst episodes in the entire f***ing show by a wide margin, holy god. This is like the textbook definition of a filler episode. Some people call any episode that doesn't focus on plot a filler episode because they don't understand what the term means. This isn't that. This is just a straight up filler episode. Every scene in the episode drags on forever. The jokes are dragged out and completely unfunny, and the whole plot just hinges on Star going on a quest to buy a Bananagic wand for no other reason than boredom. Then a string of nonsensical wacky hijinks happen and you really just get the feeling that they have no idea what to do with this episode. It's so bad. Uncharacteristically bad, in fact. There hasn't been a single truly terrible episode so far, but this one just has nothing to offer. It's just a nothing episode from start to finish. Let's not waste any more time talking about it. It'll only be remembered as the episode that got censored because of a dick joke. This episode focuses a lot more on Miss Skolnick, and I really like that. Even though it's the last time she's ever gonna be relevant, Star takes the class on an interdimensional field trip to prove she can handle Skolnick's job, and predictably buckles under the pressure immediately, and so she and Skolnick have to save the students. Besides making Skolnick a more fleshed out and likable character, learning to accept her new appearance and ultimately saving the day, I can't say much about this episode. Star not being able to handle Skolnick's job can be seen coming a mile away, so it's not like the plot itself is that interesting. There were a handful of decent jokes here, Marco continuing to further his relationship with Jackie, so that's nice to see, but other than that, it's just fine. Star is growing overly reliant on her magic for everything and casts a spell completely against Marco's wishes to grow him a beard, which as you can expect does not go well and floods the entire house with hair. Star, now without her wand, has to navigate through the house of hair and save Marco while doubting her abilities without using magic. This is the beginning of a very repetitive trend that gets continued in season 2, where Star has to learn not to rely on magic to solve her problems, so here it's a lot more forgivable as it's the first time. The impact of her learning the lesson is still hard to feel on a rewatch given how she will proceed to completely forget this lesson going forward and repeat the same arc multiple times. The actually interesting part of the episode was Ludo using this as an opportunity to get the wand before Star does, and having Toffee provide support for the other monsters and gaining their trust while Ludo keeps abusing them. Then eventually having the wand within his grasp and proceeding to fail miserably because he's hypersensitive to hair and is incredibly ticklish, acting as the final straw for Ludo's monsters and the moment Toffee has been waiting for, as he takes charge and kicks Ludo out of his castle. It sucks that this is the only truly interesting part of the episode, but it's still decent overall and is a fantastic way to set up the season 1 finale. Honestly, and don't kill me for this, I think Storm the Castle is incredibly overrated. Great episode overall, not saying it isn't, but I think people glaze it a bit too hard. It's another 22-minute episode, and the show's strengths shine very well when the plot is structured for an episode of this length, but it has some glaring problems. For starters, I don't really know what they were trying to accomplish with Star and Marco getting mad at each other at the start. I guess it was to show that even if Star gets frustrated with Marco, she'll still come to save him, attest into their friendship and everything, but not only is it unnecessary, it's very sloppily handled, with Star doing something incredibly dumb, basically needing to be saved by Marco, and then suddenly gets really pissy at him and drops this miracle of a line.
Hate when you act like this. It makes me wonder why we're even friends.
Where the hell did that come from? Then there's the ending, which to this day is one of the biggest ass pulls in the show's history, as a random mill horse speaking Italian for some reason just shows up to instantly replace the previous one in Star's wand after she casts the whispering spell. And to this day, it has not been explained beyond being done for the funny. I don't mind levity, especially after the scene that happened beforehand and the overall serious tone of the episode, but you can't just do a random equals funny bit for something that's plot relevant. It comes off as really lazy. But other than those few issues, Storm the Castle is a pretty good season finale. The tone is appropriately darker than usual. Toffee, even in death, manages to be even more interesting as he's planned out everything that happens here. Bullfrog finally allies with Star and has definitely come a long way from just being another one of Ludo's goons. He's an endearing, fleshed out character now, and a father. That's also something that happens here, I forgot. Star's confrontation with Toffee and the whispering spell scene are beautifully executed. Not a big bombastic fight, but an intense yet calm conversation showing just how much control Toffee really has over everyone in the room. We also get to see Star's new wand visibly broken and very important in the next season. Sorry if you were expecting me to go crazy with hype like a lot of people do for this episode, but I really don't think it's all that. Still, it's a great episode and a good way to cap off season 1. I may be a tad biased, but Star's first season is still my favourite when it comes to sheer entertainment and providing what people actually watch the show for. Plenty of action, good-natured humour, and just the right amount of heart. While it was mostly pretty episodic with only a tiny bit of continuity compared to the rest of the series, it's hard to really knock any points off for season 1 when it's this overwhelmingly charming and likeable. The fact that some episodes here are still what I consider to be some of the show's best productions, even after the insanely dramatic heights of season 2 and beyond, is a testament to how sharp the writing was despite the simple episodic formula. And there was only one truly garbage episode this season, which is not something I can say for the rest of the show, unfortunately. Yeah, it might be cheating to say that given season 1 is the least amount of episodes, but shut up. The plot moments we did get though, while shown sparingly, give us plenty to chew on when it comes to the show's lore and the characters as we jump into season 2. Season 2 starts pretty strong, as Glossary gets to teach Star how to dip down in order to retrieve Marco, her wand, and the spellbook from her closet. There isn't much to note about this one besides the dipping down thing being important for way later, and also the reveal that Star's wand and its magic is a little jank after being broken. Glossary also finally gets more screen time in this season, further proving that he's one of the most unhelpful mentors in fiction and a complete troll, and your mileage on that may vary depending on the episode. This time around it's funny and he's at least attempting to be useful, so that helps. One thing you'll notice immediately about season 2 though is that not only is it not nearly as high energy as season 1, the animation quality is also taking a significant hit. Usually going from digital to traditional animation is a benefit, but the animation in season 1 was constantly pulling off fluid action scenes, wasn't concerned at all about characters going off model for cartoony expressions, and generally had some pretty gorgeous lighting. Season 2, while it has its moments, looks a lot more sanitized in comparison, and this has always bugged me about seasons 2, 3, and 4. The life and color of this series has been sucked dry, and it makes for a much less appealing aesthetic, at least to me. I won't rag on the animation too much, though it is a significant downgrade, because from this point forward there are barely any action sequences in the show anymore, which on one hand prevents episodes from feeling formulaic and allows for more fleshed out and creative stories, but on the other hand, most of the show's episodes aren't actually concerned with Star versus the forces of evil. You don't need an action scene in every episode, but it's like the show changed genres entirely between seasons. From this point forward, the show is going in a much more slower paced and mellow direction, while also trying to tack on the wackiness it had previously, and you'll see later on that this can have mixed results. Still though, this is a good start to season 2. Ludo in the Wild is a very distinct episode of the series, and I genuinely think it's one of the best in the season. It follows what happened to Ludo after the events of the season 1 finale, where Star grabbed him and threw him through a portal into the void. It's an incredibly atmospheric episode, showing the harshness of Ludo's environment as he's thrown down to rock bottom and has to survive in the wild, showing how he adapts to his surroundings and climbs his way back from literally nothing, outsmarting and enslaving a giant eagle and spider that act as his companions for the rest of the series. I really like this episode, even with the slower pace of season 2. This is is incredibly different and it makes for a nice change of pace. And even though Ludo is the main antagonist, I was oddly invested in seeing him survive through hell. The reveal that the place he landed in was Muni though feels very cheap and a bit too convenient. Like, you're telling me that this guy was thrown into the deep, empty abyss of space from Muni, and after a while of floating around he just ends up in a different location in the same dimension? Like, get out of here. Other than that though, this is honestly one of my favorites, and the reveal of Ludo having the other half of Star's wand attached to the skeleton of Toffee's hand makes things very interesting going forward. Okay, so we're only 3 episodes in and the show is already going off the rails a bit. Continuing from the events of the Blood Moon, Tom hires a fake guidance counselor for Echo Creek specifically to give Star and Marco awful advice about their futures, ensuring they will never end up together. Marco catches on pretty quick and spends the rest of the episode kidnapped by Tom, while Star rebels against the notion that she has to conform to the expected ideals of a human queen. The episode is okay, but I really do not like this.
Starco was completely platonic.
Starco? Make sure there's no possibility of them ever being a thing.
General rule of thumb here, using a shipping name your fans came up with in-universe completely unironically, that's a bad omen. This is the start of Tom's redemption arc though, and I like that he and Star end things on not hateful terms. So yeah, the episode is okay, but god if that Starco line isn't the most foreboding shit ever. All of Marco's karate-focused episodes tend to suck, and this isn't much of an exception. This episode is really boring and just not very funny. I don't like Marco Sensei very much as the character. The only mildly entertaining thing is Star tearing the house apart trying to do a basic task without using magic, and this is not the last time you'll be seeing one of these plots this season. Season 2 really tries to hammer in Star not needing to use magic for everything, and given we already had an effective Season 1 episode about that with an entire arc for Star and everything, I find it super lame how often they come up with new ways just to say the same goddamn thing. You can only watch a character learn and forget a lesson over and over again so many times before it gets tiresome. So yeah, this one kinda blows. Star on Wheels is one of the few episodes this season that feels like a Season 1 episode, and I really like it. Scaling down and focusing on episodes about Star learning about basic Earth stuff is always nice to see, and it helps that the episode is actually funny. I wouldn't say it ranks high compared to some of Season 1's episodes, but I'm gonna cherish this while I can. Wasn't too sure what they were cooking with the whole invisible goat gag, really feels like a random equals funny moment that got out of hand, but I like this one and I found it to be pretty cute. Also, Glossaryck is usually at his best when he's just reacting to problems that he can't solve or help with, as opposed to being useless with plot important stuff, and he was definitely a highlight here.
Oh, Margot, the goat left long ago.
Fetch is just weird. Not Fetch itself. Go out of your dogs and play Fetch is better than watching this tribe. This is very much on the same level of faultlessness that the Banyagic incident was on, though it is considerably better as it does have an actual plot. As mind-numbing as it is, Star's wand is taken by a dog who refuses to let go of it, and after spending the whole episode being a nuisance, they reveal that they're a walking and talking dog from a dimension where dogs are just as trouble as humans are, and came to Earth to live their life as a real dog. Then Star and Marco give them away to this weird lady who pretended to be the dog's owner earlier in the episode. I'm falling asleep writing this out. This episode is boring as sin. You can genuinely skip this and have nothing change. Star goes overboard with her magic again, going against Marco's wishes again, and damages a police car, then spends the episode on the run. What you're gonna notice is that without the energy of Season 1, the show's weirdness comes off as incredibly awkward and not very fun to watch. The sequence with Star's subconscious was certainly one of the scenes of all time, and again, Season 2 really wants to hammer in how Star uses magic too much, and I got tired of it here, especially because the end of the episode proves she hasn't learned her lesson at all. It's not a fun cycle to watch, and it sucks because Star overreacting and thinking she's gonna get thrown in jail for an accident due to being a fish out of water is a great idea for an episode, but without the comedy or energy, it just feels off and boring. Star and Ludo struggle to get their wands to work properly, and we learn that the results of Star's magic from her broken wand are determined entirely by her emotions. Negative emotions make her magic destructive and chaotic, whereas positive emotions work as they used to. And having this happen when she has to save Marco made for a very effective scene. On Muni though, Ludo is having a hard time getting his wand to work at all, and given he doesn't know any spells, he has to rely entirely on his own anger to get anything done, taking over a bar and enslaving an entire army's worth of rats to do his bidding. I really like how compared to Ludo in Season 1, who is mostly just an endearing endearingly pathetic goblin barking orders at his minions, Season 2 Ludo is being established as an actual threat, climbing his way from rock bottom, capturing and enslaving anyone who could be of use to him, all the while having half of one of the most powerful things in the galaxy in the palm of his hands. This is a good episode, though again they have to emphasize Star over-relying on magic and learning a lesson she has been taught like 3 to 4 times already, and it's getting silly at this point. Starstruck is a f***ing killer episode name for this show, yet it's handed to an episode that leaves me anything but. This is our first introduction to recurring antagonist Mina Loveberry, a legally distinct version of Sailor Moon who has completely lost her marbles and is also Star's childhood hero, and she's on Earth for vacation and engaging in a lot of odd behavior that Star follows along with. There's a handful of okay jokes here, nothing too mind-blowing though.
Which ones are yours?
Those two.
Oh, bless your soul.
This is another weird episode where Star and the locals teach Mina about America's democratic voting system. I am not joking. And the episode ends revealing that Mina has in fact lost her marbles and wants to conquer Earth with Star. Then the majority of people vote no and she leaves in a huff. Honestly, given how ridiculously important Mina is later down the line, it's mad how casual this introduction is and how she's just treated as some one-off nut job that Star follows for a bit. It's okay. We've officially hit the point where River is just an absolute nutcase, but I won't rant about it anymore. I plan to, but I just can't be bothered really. Though I do really like this episode. It's simple and mostly consists of River's shenanigans being played up for laughs, but his explanation that he's being weird because he hates that he and his daughter are getting older was very sweet, and he does come in clutch towards the end. Not much here to make note of though. Bullfrog finally returns and puts Star and Marco on babysitting duty while he goes on his own solo adventure, which we'll cover in a second. A lot of cartoons have an obligatory babysitting episode, but not many have one about babysitting giant-sized tadpoles, so Star takes the W here. This one's pretty good, though it does fall into a lot of cliches associated with babysitting episodes and TV shows, with everything inevitably turning into chaos. But regardless of that, this is a very cute episode, and I love seeing that Bullfrog is now a genuine friend to Star and trusts her enough to take care of his kids. And speaking of Bullfrog, honestly, I really like the idea of Bullfrog having his own solo episode, just so we can see what he's doing while the previous episode is happening. It's something the show doesn't really do ever again, but I thought this was pretty cool even if the episode itself isn't all that engaging. Bullfrog's worried that he's becoming soft now that he's no longer doing villain work full time and mostly just spends his days happily looking after his kids, and tries to prove himself when he's hired for a job by one of Ludo's old minions. Obviously in the end he comes to the rescue and proves his worth to his team, and that's all well and good, but I really like how they're setting up Ludo and future plot events in otherwise unrelated episodes now. The show is clearly focused on telling a proper story now, and I'm here for it. Goblin dogs. God, what a rancid waste of time this was. This episode really made you feel like you were waiting in line for a goblin dog, along with proving my theory that Ponyhead's presence just naturally makes an episode worse. There's this massive line for what is supposedly the greatest hot dog in the universe or something, and it leads to a bunch of repetitive, unfunny yags about how long the lines are, and if goblin dogs even exist in the first place. And it just adds further weight to my thoughts about how aimless some episodes in the show can feel without the energy from season 1. Also, I am forever gonna be pissed at how the best animated sequence of the entire season is for the obligatory characters go on drug sequence. Not a single fight scene tops how unreasonably hard this goes for no reason. At least this episode gave us Kelly, arguably one of the most underrated and criminally underused characters in the entire show. Great design, fun character overall when they're actually used. Star and Ludo finally clash for the first time since the season 1 finale, and they give us our first fight scene of the season. And it's shit. This episode is very underwhelming. Not bad, but not great either. They spend most of the episode trying to get Glossaric out of a donut box after hurting his feelings, except they didn't hurt his feelings. And it's here we get our first tease of Glossaric basically already knowing how every single event of the entire show plays out because he knew all of this was gonna happen. At the time this episode released, this came off like a joke on his part, like he was being petty just to win an argument with Marco. But no, he literally knows everything and has been steering the events of the entire series for basically his entire existence. Which is something we'll get into later, I assure you, you blue So most of the episode is just glossaric shenanigans until he decides to help at the end. Ludo and Star realizing they both have wands was a neat moment, and it's cool seeing them interact again. Given the last time they were on screen, Star was under the impression she had basically killed him. However, the payoff for this build-up is lame as hell, and I think Marco describes it pretty accurately.
This is the worst wand fight I've ever seen.
God, just comparing this to Season 1's action scenes makes me so upset. Everything is so robotic and limited. It just sucks. The episode ends with Ludo having the Book of Spells in his sights now, and that's about the most interesting thing that happens here. Holy unbridled mid. Game of Flags is certainly a decent episode about Star subverting family traditions. Basically, both sides of her family compete in an incredibly violent game of King of the Hill where they have to place their flag on top of a very dangerous mountain. And it was interesting seeing how the game was actively changing Star's attitude until she decided to claim the hill for everyone so they stopped fighting each other to the point of almost committing murder. There's a lot of good jokes here, and it's good to have an episode focusing on Star's relationship with not just her mother but the rest of her extended family. River's had like 3 episodes with Star at this point, so I'd say this was long overdue. Even though we were introduced to Janna back in early season 1, this is more of a formal introduction as she finally has an episode to herself and Star. And while it isn't exactly the most riveting watch ever, I had fun watching Star and Janna hang out in detention. Janna in general is probably my favorite character. She just always shows up when you least expect it to be the chaotic neutral force an episode desperately needs when there's not much to be entertained by. I genuinely don't think there's one scene with her that isn't amusing on some level, and her constantly trolling Marco will never not be funny. Girls Day Out is otherwise a fine episode establishing Star and Janna's friendship, and it's an easy watch. Ah yes, the episode is incredibly overrated because they bait Starco at the very end. Good episode though. I like the twist on the typical truth or dare shenanigans that happen in sleepover episodes. It makes everything a lot more engaging. And hey, at least Marco finally confesses his feelings to Jackie here, and they don't undercut it in the slightest or humiliate him or any of that. Jackie's cool with it and Marco is happy. See, that's the good kind of relationship writing. I like that. I just don't like how you have Starco set as endgame and have to constantly remind me of that. I don't really know why this episode would be rated so highly besides that. Like, it's still really good and I don't have many complaints, managing to balance being funny while playing a game of truth or dare with Bill Cipher's misshapen cousin over here. I like how they defeat it too, even though the implication that Star was generally going to let everyone die because she couldn't admit she has a crush on Marco is a little bit yikes. I like that they defeat the cube by acknowledging that there's plenty of nuance here and how people's heads and hearts could disagree with each other, that not everything has to be black and white. It's a unique angle that I don't see covered with much of these kinds of stories, and that combined with everything else definitely makes this a great episode. Oh god, quest by episodes. Do I really have to acknowledge these? As explained earlier, these are some of the most boring and soul-destroying experiences in the whole show. Nothing here is worth talking about. Also, Miss Heinous is back, and this is just one of several underwhelming returns for her until the midpoint of season 3. Sending an assassin after Star Marco, whose whole gimmick is that he can't get his chainsaw to work properly, and they dragged this joke out for far too long. Only funny part of this episode was Marco buying a super complex locked wallet with his gift card, only for Jenna to crack it open immediately.
In fact, I've got all your sensitive information, Marco.
Get out of town!
Okay, this episode's title really annoys me. Just say frenemies. Say frenemies. Why is it called friend enemies, you absolute assholes? Tom is back and he has a fun episode with Marco, though it does end up being a ruse because Tom is the master of fumbling. He makes up for it towards the end and is slowly on his way to redeeming himself. I like this one, but it mostly sort of speaks for itself. Tom invites Marco to go see a cool martial arts movie. They end up goofing off and having fun together instead, and it all ends up just being a scheme for Tom's anger management lessons. Then he feels sorry afterwards and literally resurrects the guy from the movie they were trying to watch just to cheer Marco up. It's a simple episode and I like it. Buffrog gets another solo adventure as he investigates the hole that's been punctured in Muni's force field that shields off their corn from the monsters, eventually leading him back to Ludo, who is slowly losing his sanity while also having legitimate conversations with his wand that seem to be guiding him through everything he does, further reminding us that Toffee has planned all of this. The reunion is as awkward as you would expect, and Ludo is still struggling with his wand, but it's incredibly impressive how far he's come from just being a comic relief bad guy, running an entire operation with hundreds of captured rats and monsters at his disposal. The episode only serves to set up future events, and it does a fine enough job at that to stop me from disliking it. Crazy how it took 2 seasons before we got a Halloween episode, and this one definitely delivers on being pretty disturbing. I think it's an odd but ultimately respectful choice to have an episode about Marco's dad for a change. He's an incredibly sweet and carefree guy from what we've seen of him, and him being upset over kids not finding him scary and then going absolutely feral seeing his family in danger was an expected twist, but still one that I enjoyed. Hungry Larry himself is definitely not what you're expecting. While the episode certainly isn't scary to me, I can definitely see it upsetting children, which means it's a good Halloween episode by default. Weirdly, he reminds me of the Halloween trickster from Gravity Falls, which I don't think is what they were going for, but I do think the trickster is far better as an antagonist. But Hungry Larry is still pretty disturbing for a kid's show, and I gotta give the episode props for that. An episode focusing on the lives of Star's spells whenever they aren't being used was definitely not what I was expecting, but it's harmless overall. Found it really cute actually, focusing on one of Star's entertainment spells and how he wants to be so much more and actually be of use to Star in battle. And isn't aware that his top hat is a chain gun, so I guess that works out. You know, for one of Star's strongest spells, it's odd that we only see him get used a grand total of once after this. Not much to add here, this was fine. Now, this is more like it. Star delves deep into her wand to find the thing that doesn't belong, which happens to be causing her magic to act up. Even though this episode is just a massive lore dump showing us the previous Queens of Muni, teasing what's to come, and finally hinting at what Toffee's plan was as Star literally retrieves his severed finger, it does it all very well. It's juggling a lot of important stuff, and thankfully it doesn't miss the mark once. A few jokes that are here are funny, and we actually get an honest-to-God sincere moment between Star and Glossaric.
I'm not tall enough to go on this ride.
I'm not tall enough to go on any ride, but I've been on them all.
I really love this little exchange. Even though Star and Glossaric don't exactly have a perfect student and mentor dynamic, I really think we could have used more of this stuff from Glossaric. Not making him a big softy or anything, but just giving us brief moments of sincerity so we can actually care more when bad things happen later on. For a glorified lore dump episode, this is pretty good. Ponyhead has an episode with Marco where they try to order pizza. It's not good. You have to try very, very hard to make a character like Ponyhead consistently funny or even likable, and they just keep failing to do that. She is nothing but an annoyance, an actual enjoyment vacuum that rattles me to my core whenever she speaks. This episode blows, let's move on. I really do appreciate that Season 2 makes up for Glossaric's complete lack of screen time in Season 1, and now we have an entire episode where he sits around for 5 minutes before deciding to actually move the plot forward. Basically, just as Glossaric is about to teach Star about the book's forbidden chapter, he's called to a meeting with the Magical High Commission, consisting of Romulus, Hecapoo, Omnitraxus, and Lekmet. Okay, I'm just gonna jump the gun a bit here. Fuck these guys. Not so much Hecapoo or Lekmet, though Hecapoo definitely doesn't do much good until later on. It's Omnitraxus and Romulus. Omnitraxus because of just how insanely useless he is despite being a conceptually awesome character, and Romulus for quite possibly being the most obnoxious dickhead in the entire show. He just has nothing going for him as a character besides being a big dumb idiot who only exists to make things worse. I'll go more in depth of how much I loathe the High Commission later on, but just keep this in mind for now. Thankfully, the episode doesn't involve them too much, and it was fun to actually see Glossaric fight and show that he's much more powerful than basically everyone in the room. I also like that he explains why he teaches Star the way he does compared to Moon and the other queens. And this, along with his exchange with Star at the end of Into the Wand, does a lot of heavy lifting given what's about to happen to him in 2 episodes' time. Honestly, if there wasn't so much filler leading up to Glossaric actually moving the plot forward, this would be a legitimately great episode, but I'll settle for a good episode, no problem. Naysayer. God, people seem to be very split on Naysayer, and I don't blame them. This is probably the biggest and most unfair example of Marco being the universe's punching bag and one of the most forced ways they could have furthered his relationship with Jackie. Basically, Marco grows this abomination on his neck that starts shouting Marco's embarrassing insecurities out loud to people when he's near Jackie, and it turns out this was a curse placed on him by Tom before they started hanging out as friends. It was apparently placed on him to prevent him from asking out Star after the Blood Moon Ball, but it's for some reason getting in the way of him asking out Jackie because I guess Tom didn't think hard enough about the concept of being specific, and because there is no way to get rid of the curse, he is forced to explain all of his insecurities to Jackie for hours on end in front of the entire school. I'm usually not one to go up in arms about the treatment of a cartoon character, but Marco genuinely doesn't deserve anything he goes through in the show, and having this be the way he's forced to ask out Jackie for a date after all the development and build up to this moment being a natural thing feels unnecessarily mean-spirited, and it's a big part of why a lot of people can't stand this episode. Thankfully, because Jackie isn't actually perfectly decent human being and probably the most chill character on the show next to Jenna, she appreciates that Marco was honest, while still acknowledging that he was basically forced to say this stuff to get rid of the curse, and invites him to go watch a movie with her. Despite the sweet conclusion, I really dislike this episode, and it's unfortunately not the last time Marco gets the raw end of the deal for no reason, though it is definitely the most egregious, and future incidents are not nearly as rough. Holy wow, I genuinely forgot how friggin' amazing this episode is. There's a good reason why this one is usually at the top, or at least in the top 5 of everyone's lists. This is, without exaggeration, one of the best mid-season finales to a Disney show. Period. Bonbon just does everything right. For starters, this is the first half-hour special of the season, and the show's more slow-paced approach for the season works perfectly with 22-minute episodes, to the point where I am genuinely upset that every other episode, besides a handful of exceptions, are still 11 minutes long. It is just firing on all cylinders from start to finish. Marco and Jackie officially being in a relationship that feels naturally written and fun to watch unfold, tragically being undercut by the appearance of the Blood Moon, and while I'm still not a fan of the overall execution of Starco, this is still an indescribably good way to startle the viewer. Star's feelings for Marco finally bubbling up with some honestly good relationship drama, her using one of Queen Eclipse's forbidden spells to spy on them, Ludo interrupting Star and Jenna's seance for a battle that, while not coming close to anything in season 1, is far better than the pathetic display they had previously, and all of this is topped off of Ludo swiping the spellbook and Glossric for himself. From start to finish, this episode is delivering on so many plot points, and while again I am very critical of the way the show handles romance from season 3 onwards, the relationship drama is actually good here, and that is a massive compliment. The stakes haven't been this high since season 1's finale, and after what was overall a pretty tame first part of season 2, this was just the pickup the show needed. I tend to disagree with many of the episodes people claim are the best in the series, but there are no objections to this one, just stellar from start to finish. And continuing with the streak of fantastic episodes, while the stakes are obviously not as high, this is a great follow-up as Star and Marco rush Ludo's base of operations to try and retrieve Glossric and the book. What we get is a pretty upsetting scene of Glossric being loyal to whoever technically owns the book, being completely indifferent to Star's attempts to rescue him, much to Star's disappointment and sadness. However, the monsters currently living in Ludo's base since he moved out revealed they're actually massive fans of Star, and she realizes that she has a bit of a reputation as a rebellious princess. This episode, while obviously shorter than the last, is still great, and Star beginning to write her own book of spells at the end was a perfect way to end it. Well, I mean, it was a nice streak while it lasted. Trickstar is a very annoying episode because once again, it's a good idea that it's just completely squandered and not brought to its full potential. Screw it, this episode is like negative potential. It's like they choose the worst possible way to write this episode. There's this magician at a birthday party who is visibly draining people's joy, and Star is naturally suspicious of this person, but Marco just thinks she's being dramatic. I get that Marco's probably used to Star doing dumb stuff since she's a fish out of water, but it makes the episode incredibly frustrating. Even more so when Star finally exposes that he's been sucking away people's joy and that he isn't a real magician, and instead everyone turns on Star and gets mad at her for ruining the magic for them. It's genuinely just rotten writing, and this being off the heels of 2 of the most emotionally charged episodes of the show that put Star in quite a stressed out mental state makes for quite the whiplash. I hate episodes where a character is objectively correct yet everyone gets mad at them anyway. It's one of my most despised writing tropes, so by default this episode would be one of my least favorites, but they really went the extra mile in making this episode profoundly unlikable. Star's magic skills are evaluated by this thing called Baby, and if she fails the evaluation, she is to be sent back to Muni. Simple on the surface, and it is for the most part. Star fails to impress due to her wand acting up and her not being able to do basic magic. Gonna just blame Glossric for that one. But then she casts an incredibly advanced spell that perfectly produces the apple that Baby requested, and she leaves satisfied, then explaining to Moon and River that Star's not only far beyond Moon's level, but that she hasn't seen magic like this since Queen Eclipse, a figure we are gonna learn a lot more about soon. Baby's uncaring responses to Star failing are pretty funny, and while we all know that Star isn't going to get sent away and will complete the task that's set for her eventually, having basically all of her flaws being spat out in front of her face was definitely a bit of a gut punch. Also, I don't know why River says monster love upon hearing Star being compared to Eclipse. I get that it's supposed to be this super foreboding thing because Eclipse is just the worst according to them, but now with the rest of the series as context, it just comes off as an unfinished idea that they didn't really do anything with. And it's even dumber when you consider that they knew and approved of Star dating Tom for a while, so like, what is this reaction? That aside, good episode, I guess. Despite what the title implies, this is not an episode about Marco going postal across the multiverse. Running with Scissors is yet another episode that many people claim is one of the best in the series, and I definitely see why, but I don't agree. For starters, this is our formal introduction to Hekapu, one of the members of the Magic High Commission, and to say this is not a flattering first impression is putting it lightly. Hekapu catches on to Marco abusing Ponyhead's dimensional scissors and confiscates them, saying he can earn his own if he manages to blow out her flame. All of them, across different dimensions. Despite still having the option to return home, Marco goes for Hekapu anyway on a journey that spans 16 years and dozens of adventures, arriving at her doorstep a fully grown adult and earning his dimensional scissors and her respect. However, only 8 minutes have passed back on Earth, and when Marco returns to Earth as a teenage boy again, he's genuinely lost. The last third of this episode is absolutely fantastic, I'll give it that. The shock of seeing a fully grown, badass adventurer Marco, the sting of only 8 minutes having actually passed, the scene at the end where Marco stares at his computer unable to remember his password, it's masterfully done. I see why this episode left an impact on so many people, and it's definitely great, but it's only really the last third that sells me on it. Hekapu is really unlikable, though she does get a lot better later in the series, and Star tweaking out over grown up Marco was funny, I guess. I may not think it's as good as everyone thinks it is, but I can't deny its quality. I just wish we got to see more of Marco struggling through his journey instead of just smash cutting to 16 years in the future. Hell, even a montage would have sufficed. Math magic is fucking stupid. This is our introduction to Omnitraxis of the Magic High Commission, arguably the coolest concept for a member of a High Commission of magic users, and it's utterly wasted and never used to its full potential. Hell, it's not even used at all. Basically, because Star doesn't know how to solve one math problem, her timelines are colliding with themselves, and it's keeping her trapped in a time loop. And if she doesn't solve the math problem, literally all of space-time will shatter and collapse. Ignoring how this doesn't make any sense and is a stupid idea in the first place, completely going against the mere concept of a fucking multiverse, this episode is basically just an excuse to show a bunch of alternate designs for the characters and to introduce one of the members of the High Commission, and in that sense it succeeds. But it doesn't change that the very foundation of the plot is a logistical nightmare that isn't properly explained beyond lol, space-time, also it's fiction, don't think about it. And for a series like Star, which has established rules and is clearly taking its storytelling seriously, I'd rather not have stuff like this personally. Mid-episode, honestly. Star and her friends try to save the Bounce Lounge from going out of business. That's it, a handful of jokes that work, Ponyhead is present, it's like fine, or something, but I genuinely have nothing to talk about here. And now we have our formal introduction to Romulus of the Magic High Commission, who kidnaps Star and Marco in the dead of night. Now, something I forgot to say earlier is that there's currently a magical fritz going on, and it's causing magic to not work properly across dimensions. Spoilers though, you probably know this already, it's Toffee. His finger being left in Star's wand, his calm smile while sitting in front of the exploding wand in Season 1, he is currently having some sort of influence on the magic. Anyway, now that I've explained that, Romulus believes that Star is the cause of the fritz because he's a dumb fucking moron, and the episode goes into great detail on just how much of a dumb fucking moron Romulus is, leaving his dumb fucking moron gut before any other emotion and crystallizing anyone he merely suspects of being evil. And more often than not, he's completely wrong, even freezing Lekmet when he tries to tell the High Commission about what new dumb fucking moron up Romulus has done this time. Okay children, let's stop with the swearing and start being constructive. I'm sorry, but Romulus is not just an unlikable character, he's a horribly written one, and this episode is the proof. The whole episode is about him realizing his mistakes and that he shouldn't just go with his gut all the time, that he's captured actual innocent people out of paranoia. The episode also directly implies further character growth for him, but none of that ever happens. After this episode, he just defaults back to being a big dumb idiot who crystallizes first and asks questions later. And to add further insult to injury, he's also insanely bigoted, but that's a discussion for later. I kinda just wanted to use this episode to rant about Romulus because it's not a very stimulating experience otherwise. Just meaningless character development bait that goes nowhere. The meat of the episode is Star having a conversation with him. That's it. We finally get back to Ludo as he begins trying to learn spells with the unhelpful assistance from Glossaric. We also get a glimpse into just how unwell Ludo has become over time. Ludo's never been a completely sane character, but you can see a steep decline in his mental well-being from the moment Star tosses him into the void to now. He becomes far more excitable, disturbed, and borderline deranged, seeing Glossaric as a father figure and becomes incredibly attached to him. It's very uncomfortable to watch Ludo act like this, and it's pretty well done. It's fascinating how far he's both risen and fallen at the same time, as he descends spins into madness. And to add on to this, upon reading Eclipse's chapter in the Book of Spells, he immediately becomes influenced by it, and after a brief moment his body is possessed by Toffee, who speaks directly to Glossaric. Just hearing Toffee's voice again after so long, especially for Ludo's possessed body, genuinely sent chills down my spine. It's such a good performance. While the episode starts out funny, it quickly devolves into being wonderfully uncomfortable and then dropping a bombshell on everyone before it ends. This episode was really good. Out of all the episodes that feature Miss Heinous as the antagonist, this is undoubtedly the worst. Heinous arrives directly at Star Marco's doorstep, desperate for revenge. But before you can be under the impression that this is going to be an epic showdown, Marco's parents intervene, and from here on the episode devolves into being so goddamn silly. Heinous, despite being a visibly deranged and psychotic individual who makes several direct threats towards their child, is humoured by Marco's parents, who genuinely believe that Marco has done something to unjustifiably wrong this woman. Even when Star and Marco explain who she is and what she's done, the Diazes refuse to budge and spend the whole episode negotiating with her. Are you yanking my chain? This is ridiculous. These two know that Star and Marco go on interdimensional trips and beat bad guys. They've seen it firsthand. Why on earth are they even humouring this woman? Especially after she directly makes threats on their son's life in front of them? This is a typical YouTube reviewer cliche, but I have to ask, who wrote this? All of this because they want to impress some people who are coming over for dinner? Like, what? I don't get genuinely angry at TV shows because I'm a functioning adult, but I have never wanted to slap two fictional characters into the fucking sun as much as I wanted to here. Even local law enforcement don't get involved, even though it's super easy to just say, "Hello officer, I am a 14-year-old boy being threatened by my doorstep by this elderly hag." Sorry. This is genuinely one of the worst episodes of the show. It might genuinely be worse than the Benagic incident because at least that one doesn't make my brain explode. Expect this to be near the bottom for sure. Marco Karate episode. It isn't funny, I do not like it. The end. Oh my god, I did not remember season 2 having so many bad episodes. I still think this is a good season, like easy 7 out of 10, but you really have to sift through some garbage before you get to the good stuff. Star accidentally breaks the possum statue outside her school, which was apparently representative of the school and the town's history or something, and I genuinely don't care. And this one statue being destroyed leads to everyone in the school becoming stuck with grief and depression, which is played up for laughs, none of which actually land. All of this is solved because Star says a single paragraph through the intercom about how they don't need a statue to define who they are. Storytelling bliss. The episode is just stupid from top to bottom. Not a single part of it is funny. The overreaction to the destruction of a statue is mildly amusing at first, but it gets old immediately, and the way everything is resolved is so uncreative and such a blindly obvious solution that I genuinely slammed my forehead down on my keyboard while recording it, which upset OBS, and now I don't have footage of the last 30 seconds. Genuinely repugnant dog shit. I gotta say, it's been very refreshing going back to season 2 and seeing just how good the relationship drama was before the show lost its goddamn mind. That being said, this entire episode leading up to the iconic final scene was not exactly a great watch. It was basically entirely Marco abuse for no other reason than I guess they thought it was funny. I wasn't exactly amused, but ignoring all that, the final scene at the Love Sentence concert is one of the most iconic scenes in the show, and it's an emotionally effective kick in the face to anyone who's legitimately invested in the relationships between these characters. But given this was an episode entirely about Star, Marco, and Jackie hanging out, I'm sorely disappointed they used the opportunity just to abuse Marco for laughs and nothing else that could have added to the drama. Another contender for one of the season's best episodes. Star has to have her own princess song like all the princesses before her, trying her best to avoid the problem entirely and to completely write off Ruberiot, her songstrel, not realizing that he's a bit of a tortured artist, and ultimately decides to defy tradition entirely with it. That's all well and good, but the B-plot focuses directly on Queen Moon, who sets out to find where Ludo is located so she can find and retrieve the Book of Spells, encountering Ludo's parents along the way, as well as Ludo's younger brother, Dennis, who still respects his brother and shows Moon where he is. It was really interesting to finally get a look at Ludo's family situation, and from the looks of things, while his parents hate him for usurping their castle, it's clear they weren't exactly the best at bringing him up, evidenced by their treatment of Dennis. I really liked Moon's subplot, not only because it shows her actually going out of her way to do something instead of acting as a queen for a change, but also for everything we learn about Ludo and his upbringing. It also sets up the events of the season finale quite nicely. Then there's Star's Song Day, and I don't have much to say here that's mind-blowing or anything. The song is fantastic, the sequence in general is just great, and the tension builds up as the song goes on, with with Star being completely honest with the people of Muni and letting people know how dire things really are, while inadvertently showing that Moon had been lying to the public and the High Commission. And to cap everything off, Ruberiot completely goes rogue and publicly tells all of Muni that Star has a crush on Marco. As forced as this may be, it is f***ing devastating on such a comical level that I can't help but respect the balls it took to go through with it. By the end of the episode, everything is in complete chaos. The Mutant public and the High Commission are angry at the royal family for lying, Moon and the High Commission are readying up to storm Ludo's temple, and Star and Marco are, well, you know. And believe it or not, this was only the calm before the storm. Star Crushed, to this day, is one of the best season finales to a Disney show ever, and easily within the top 10 best episodes of the whole show. While Star and Marco's side of the plot is considerably less action-packed, it is filled with tension and dread after what happened on Song Day, with Jackie's presence not helping things cool down at all. Meanwhile, Moon and the High Commission storm Ludo's temple and quickly seize him, as the High Commission search for Glossaric and the book. Ludo opens up about how difficult growing up was in his family and even asks if Dennis is doing okay when Moon mentions she saw him. This scene really shows just how unwell Ludo is, having been through so much yet continuing to get back up after losing everything. This entire rant of his is incredibly sad, and that little expression change when he asks about how Dennis is doing goes a long way to show that there are parts of Ludo that aren't completely tainted by evil or selfish desires. Moon offers to help him, but by the time the High Commission come back, Toffee has taken over, absorbing Moon's magic and fusing the wand into Ludo's skin, and one by one he takes down the High Commission and a revived Moon in no time flat. While the animation here is not particularly impressive for what's supposed to be a super dramatic action scene, it still does the job pretty effectively and shows just how powerful Toffee is in this form. And the added death of Lekman after reviving Moon only adds to how overwhelmingly hopeless everything looks. As Moon escapes, Toffee lets her know that he's coming back for his severed finger. I'm still amazed at how well structured and paced Star Crushed is, and out of all the episodes in the show, this may have the hardest hitting dramatic beats of them all. Moon telling Star she needs to leave Earth immediately will never not be devastating, and her having to rush down and finally confess her feelings to Marco in tears is genuinely like getting shot in the chest. I don't have much else to add. For a season finale, this was basically perfect from start to finish, and I'm still impressed that it holds up this well to this day. Season 2 is definitely not as good as I remember it being, but that's okay. As it stands, I still think it's a good season overall, featuring some of the greatest episodes in the series and really flexing the show's dramatic and emotional strengths. However, there's a startling number of episodes that are either just mid or straight up garbage, and I have a hard time figuring out why so many of these had to fail. Many of them have great ideas that should work perfectly with this show, yet they're never fully realized, and in some cases, they just aren't realized at all. The downgrade in animation quality and the lack of that high energy zaniness in season 1 is also definitely hurting the show in the long run. While there may not be nearly as many action scenes anymore, the ones that are here are serviceable at best and actual trash at worst. This isn't an insult to anyone who worked on the show, of course. Animation is hard, animation is expensive, and I don't know what the show's budget was, but when the first season looked like this, it really doesn't make sense why the animation had to change so drastically. Even with my complaints about season 2's lows in mind, it doesn't change how many high points this season had, and I still believe it's worth watching. We're now on to Season 3. You can tell because the intro looks worse, and we continue right after the events of Star Crushed as Star and Moon search for a place to hide while keeping the magic out of commission safe and sound. It's a good way to set the tone and show how bad things really are right now in Muni. Also from this point forward, Star and Moon are actually going to be interacting more, and it finally feels like Moon is an actual person who cares deeply for her daughter. The whole cold and distant perfect image of a ruling queen basically flies out the window this season, and she's far better off for it. We also learn that Toffee was responsible for killing Moon's mother and forcing her to become Queen of Muni at a very early age, and she made a deal with Queen Eclipsa, who was apparently very much alive. And keen-eyed viewers were probably aware of this given her cameo in the background of Crystal Clear in Season 2. This is also probably the first time we've seen Moon properly lose her composure aside from brief periods of frustration. It goes a long way with making me actually care about her and her relationship with Star. And speaking of her history with Another great episode, honestly. It's a flashback to just after Moon's mother was killed and she was appointed queen, with the High Commission in complete disarray. Also, Mina's here, and this is evidently at some point before she lost her mind. It was really cool seeing Moon tackle so many problems at such a young age and to see what life was like when she was still a princess learning how to use magic. Also, something bad had to have happened to River somewhere down the line because he seems way more polite and intelligent here than years later on. We also finally get to meet Queen Eclipsa, and for being built up as this super evil queen with her own forbidden chapter and a super creepy looking painting, she's not what you would expect, being very polite while also having a silly playful side to her and actually seeming to be a more morally grey character compared to how she's been talked about. We're going to be seeing a lot more of Eclipsa later this season, and she's already made a pretty strong first impression, also teaching Moon a spell capable of killing immortal and regenerative beings, like Toffee, in exchange for her freedom when Toffee is killed. And even though Moon doesn't end up killing Toffee, merely removing his finger and scattering his army in the process, this contract of theirs is still in place until the day Toffee is finally killed. This was a really cool episode. I get that it's easy to praise flashback episodes for showing a lot of cool stuff that happened in the past that was only alluded to previously, but it does such a good job. This episode is okay, I guess. It's mostly just Glossaric trolling Ludo, which is kind of funny, and it only really picks up towards the end when Ludo finally snaps and throws Glossaric and the book into the fire, destroying the book and killing Glossaric. And he goes out in the most Glossaric way possible, which is complete apathy. I mean, bro knows he's coming back later, it's not like he has anything to worry about, he is on a suicide mission after all. And with Glossaric gone, Toffee can finally make Ludo do his bidding. I am a little disappointed that this is another episode where it again only picks up at the very end, but what's here still makes it worth watching, and it helps that the episode itself is pretty funny leading up to it. Marco finally decides to use his dimensional scissors to go to Muni and find Star, only to find River alone in the castle, having absolutely wrecked the place after partying non-stop in Moon's absence. This episode is pretty funny and I like it, but it's again another case where there could have been something more interesting as opposed to just throwing the important story stuff in at the very end as Ludo and his army take over Muni. It's instead about River failing as a king and not being very well liked by the human public until he finally stands up to a monster that isn't even trying to attack the city. Funny payoff and funny episode in general, but it does feel like a bit of a waste of time. This episode is all about monster racism. Yay! Seasons 3 and 4 go full steam ahead on the racism and segregation allegory, and I'll get more into that when it starts pissing me off. But for now, we have a really awkward and uncomfortable game between Moon and Buffrog where they both slowly realize through playing a very biased board game that they aren't actually that different. I found the board game scene to be pretty well done, and it gets progressively more heated as the two keep pointing out stereotypes that humans and monsters will have about each other, though Moon still has a lot of monster racism to flush out of her system, because between the two, she is just a straight up racist asshole to Buffrog who does nothing but try to be nice to her and Star. Seriously, some of the stuff she says is so comically dehumanizing, and I get it, this is a cartoon and it's a metaphor, but god does this woman have problems she needs to address. I mean, she was upset to find out Star was friends with Buffrog in the first place. I don't think this is a bad episode, but given what's currently happening in the story, I think this is time that should have been spent far more wisely to make things less rushed later on, which if you have any knowledge about how the show is going to be later on, this is going to be a recurring problem in the show's #1 fatal flaw: poor time management. Well, it was interesting to see these two interact and discard their biases, and I appreciate how uncomfortable they made it to really drive home how awful what Moon is saying is. I don't think this was a necessary episode at all. Good episode overall, showing the disastrous state of Muni as Ludo's unhinged leadership leaves the place in shambles, and Marco teams up with the castle's entertainment to try and take down Ludo. I like these guys, they're fun and have a great dynamic even though we don't see much of them after this. The episode ends with Ludo throwing River into the sky to strike fear into the public as Marco and his team get ready to fight. It's a fun episode, especially the whole spy sequence and stealing the key from Ludo. I think I'd probably like this more if the last episode didn't already waste a bunch of time, but this one was fine. Oh, at last, I think I found it! The most overrated episode of the entire f***ing show. How is it rated this high? General reactions over the years have been very mixed towards this episode, specifically the last third of it. It's all well and good leading up to that, downright great actually. Star and Marco's stories collide, Ludo acknowledges that he's going insane and finally realizes he's being influenced by Toffee and asks Star to help him, resulting in her doing the whispering spell once again and ending up surrounded by drained and corrupted magic, and right alongside her, is Toffee, who takes control of Ludo, fully regenerates his body, and walks away knowing that he's won. This episode is downright fantastic up to this point. Seeing everyone's reactions to Star basically being killed was heart-wrenching, and it really does seem like all is finally lost and that Toffee playing the long game has finally paid off. That is, until this happens. Star ends up in an unknown purgatory-like place alongside Glossaric and notices that there's magic floating around in the stew that he's cooking, and recalling Glossaric's previous advice, literally dips down and creates a brand new mill horse. This, for some reason, revives Star, and she inexplicably powers up into a new Muberty form, takes aim at Toffee, and then she one-shots him! And before you think Toffee could possibly come back from this, he's finished off by Ludo. Ignoring how much of a massive anticlimax this was, especially given it took Toffee 2 entire seasons to fully reform and wasn't even given the chance to do anything he may have had planned, this is perhaps the purest example of a Deus Ex Machina in the whole show. Basically, all is lost and Toffee has claimed victory, Star is essentially dead, and she ends up in some unknown place with Glossaric that she pulls magic from, which allows her to power up and instantly kill Toffee right after his return that was built up for years. This fucking blows. It was all going so well before this happened, genuinely a top 5 episode of the whole show, and then this happens out of nowhere. I'm still upset about it to this day, it's such an ass pull. Anyway, now that Toffee is officially dead, the terms of Moon's contract with Eclipsa have been fulfilled, and even though she hasn't broken out yet, she's slowly cracking out of Romulus's crystal. Overall, years later, I am still miffed about this episode. It's a case where the final act ruins basically everything. All that time and build up establishing Toffee as a menacing, calculating, and powerful threat for ages, only to do this. It's so disappointing. I have no idea why this episode is as highly rated as it is. Well, at the very least, the show is now moving on from the Toffee arc, but I really wish this was handled better. Also, Ludo gets thrown into the void again, voluntarily this time, and from here on out, he is no longer an antagonist and barely shows up. And ironically, he gets far better closure later on than anyone else here, so he definitely lucked out. What is the conflict here? I get that it's sad for Star and Marco that they're no longer living together, but for the next few episodes, the show just forgets that Marco has his own dimensional scissors and can literally come visit Star whenever he pleases. This goodbye scene has no real impact because of this one simple solution to basically all of their problems, and Marco having to make a choice later on between Earth and Muni makes this even more puzzling. Anyway, the episode is about Star clinging onto Marco's dirty hoodie because she doesn't want to forget about him, and Ponyhead, for the first time in the series, is being legitimately reasonable about it. This shit is weird. Star fighting over Marco's dirty hoodie before predictably realizing that she's basically lost her mind wasn't funny nor engaging. Star begins seeing visions of Glossaric and believes that she's being haunted by him. This one's fine, although it is a little unclear why Glossaric is haunting Star or why Star apologizing for being a jerk to him is enough to resurrect him. I don't really get it, but at least the episode is fun to watch, which is a start. Also, knowing that Glossaric is not actually broken and is just trolling everyone for the entire season is certainly an interesting choice on his part. And here it is. Here's where the show officially loses its mind when it comes to the shipping. While I do like that this episode shows just how far Tom has come as a character, and that him snubbing Star the whole episode was just him giving her space as he wrongly thinks she's dating Marco, and has no problem with it, god that was a sentence, the decision to get Star and Tom back together feels like a really unnecessary curveball, and that it only serves to further delay Starco into a will-they-won't-they state, even though everyone is aware by now that it's going to be endgame. While Star and Tom's relationship going forward is far healthier than previously, and they do have really good chemistry together, it's undercut by how much of an obviously bad idea this was. It is artificially creating relationship drama, and I do not like that one bit. This is only the beginning, everyone. Buckle up, because this show is about to drunkenly walk into several trains and keep getting back up as if nothing happened. Eclipsa is finally free from Romulus's crystal, and it's here that we finally get to see and understand her more. And from now on, Eclipsa joins the main cast and is arguably one of the most important characters in the show. And that's fine by me because I really like Eclipsa, and she's definitely one of my favorite characters. I love how she plays into her poor reputation as an evil queen of darkness by being playfully sarcastic about all of it, and teasing people who have suspicions of her. She has a really fun personality, and basically any conversation she has with any character is fun to watch. She bounces off everyone really well. It's also here that we see all of the episodes episodes attempting to humanize the Magic High Commission are kinda thrown out the window as they desperately scramble to find any reason to recrystallize Eclipsa for being evil without any concrete proof, making Star and basically anyone with functioning eyes believe that she was unjustly imprisoned and should properly stand trial, an idea that she has to legitimately fight for to even have it humored by Moon and the High Commission. While this is a legitimately good plot hook, it only further emphasizes my frustration with how the High Commission are written, and that besides Hekapu, who gets some decent episodes with Marco later on, all of the attempts to show how to humanizing and characterizing these people is thrown out the window, and by season 4 they just become one-note bigots. I liked seeing Star get along with Eclipsa though, even if she doesn't fully trust her, and despite my grievances with the High Commission, this was pretty solid. Tom goes to get a demon schism to try and cure his anger management problems and to better his relationship with Star. It's about this point that I finally came around on Tom and genuinely began liking him, and he only gets better from here on. Even though his anger problems are frustratingly explained away as just being a natural thing demons do, he's a lot more laid back now and actively striving for self-improvement, no matter how stupid the method may be. The demon schism goes about how you would expect it to, but I like how this whole episode really puts Star and Tom's relationship to the test and shows that they're actually serious about staying together. For as much as I hate the idea in the long term, I'm happy they're at least getting it right in the short term. Oh man, this episode sucks. You've probably noticed it by now, but the quality of season 3 is incredibly inconsistent with a plethora of baffling writing decisions, and this episode is probably one of the most egregious. Marco's been going on a massive ego trip after saving Muni and being knighted by River, and already I'm at a loss for words because this is just so out of character for Marco. Never in a million years would I have pictured Marco being a complete douchebag just because he helped save the day like he usually does with Star. Sure, the battle for Muni was far more important and I can understand him being excited, but he lets this go so far into his head that he ruins his relationship with his friends, is an annoyance to everyone around him because he keeps bragging about his accomplishments, and even sabotages his relationship with Jackie, and she leaves him over it. This is another example of the show going overboard with the shipping, because Marco and Jackie getting together was a genuinely great payoff, and they were great together. Jackie is a very likable and chill character, to the point where even as she's breaking up with Marco, she doesn't just shut him out her life or treat him like trash. She just lets him know what her problems are and wants to stay friends with him. Can someone please save her? She deserves to be in a far better show. This is a super forced way to break up Marco and Jackie just to get Marco interested in Star, which is going to conflict and create drama because she's currently dating Tom. It's such a mess. And it all happens because one of the most likable characters in the show chose not to act like himself for a single episode. And then there's the whole issue of him struggling between Earth and Muni again, as if he doesn't have a pair of dimensional scissors he can use to visit Star literally anytime he wants. Character assassination is one thing, forcing romantic drama is another, but having the whole point of the episode hinge on Marco's inability to realize he can still see Star whenever he wants to and just doesn't care is a dumb idea. Marco arrives on Muni and is shocked and disappointed to see that Star is dating Tom, which is strike one for his stupid decision to come live in Muni permanently, then realizes that he isn't an actual knight and blew up his entire life and all his relationships over something that wasn't even true, which is strike two. And on top of that, Star is not exactly happy to see him because she's being a massive hypocrite about Marco forcing himself into her life. You get the picture. Then the episode devolves into Marco becoming a squire for the cleaning guy in the hoodie episode, and ends up with him resolving his fight with Star and becoming a squire instead. The fact that Marco blew up his entire life for a girl who was in the process of moving on and over a lie he was told makes this episode so bitter and hard to swallow, and on top of it not being fun to watch anyway. Ugh, quest by episodes. Star and Marco have this trial thing for squires to buy everything that's required of them or some junk like that. Anyway, Marco gets bullied the entire episode and there's conflict towards the end because Star just wants Marco around so they can do silly stuff like they used to do before she left Earth. And I mean, the ending is sweet and all, but it doesn't change that this is yet another boring quest by episode that I do not care for. Oh wow, the double whammy of a quest by episode being followed up by a Miss Heinous episode. I'm having so much fun with this season. Granted, this is miles better than the last Miss Heinous episode, and it was interesting to see how St. Olga's has been doing since season 1. Marco's princess persona is worshipped and all the princesses there are living their best lives. And I really like the ending at least, where Heinous finally reveals to everyone that Marco's been a boy the whole time, yet they don't care and still acknowledge that he gave them all strength and inspired thousands of people of his rebellious nature. It was a neat twist, and while I can't say the episode was very funny or has much in the way of plot significance, I liked it overall, and honestly I really needed one of these episodes to be good. I am being really negative about this season and I don't want to be, believe me. More monster racism, that's fun. I liked how they showed the double standard when one of the Mumins starts chastising Tom without realizing that he's royalty, and the moment he realizes, he immediately starts bootlicking him. That's a part of the metaphor I actually kinda like, though it is very on the nose. This episode has Star trying to figure out why monsters are discriminated against so harshly, and is the catalyst for her championing equal rights in Muni and trying to repair monster and human relations. The show hasn't lost its mind just yet with the monster racism. Again, that's mostly towards the end of the season and mostly on season 4, so we at least get an episode showing how bad things currently are without any major writing fumbles, though Buffrog being appointed as Muni's new monster expert is a pointless payoff that ultimately goes nowhere. Okay, we're finally back with some really good shit. Star's been transforming into her puberty form and going on adventures through different dimensions in her sleep, and wants to figure out, well, why that's happening. It's a very straightforward episode, so there's not a whole lot to add, but it's pretty good and sets up Star learning to control her puberty form. I really love Star and Eclipse's conversation about these dreams, of her questioning if it's necessary for Star to really stop them from happening, and suggest to embrace these dreams and see where they take her. It's a much different response than what Moon or Glossrick or any other character could have given Star, and I like that Eclipse's advice is far riskier while still having her own morally grey brand of wisdom to it. Knowing now that she isn't the evil monster she's made out to be, it's really cool seeing a character who embraces the darker side of magic and takes risks while still being a good person. And it adds to Star's own uniqueness compared to the other queens in Muni too, taking advice from multiple sources while not conforming to any of their overall ideals. Also, Eclipse teasing Marco was funny. She's definitely a great addition to the show. More shipping madness. This time Marco finally comes to the realization that he does have feelings for Star and is just making himself miserable being around her, and being heartbroken seeing Star and Tom kiss. Then the show sets up Marco and Kelly's bond, and looking back at this episode and seeing where it's actually led in the long run just makes this insanely depressing and sorta pointless. The episode is good, don't get me wrong, it's an effective way to get Marco to finally wake up and accept the reality of what's going on, but the constant additions to the romantic drama are getting sillier by the second. Yeah, this is a filler episode. Even though the concept of the episode, getting Rich Pigeon to sign a petition for equal rights, is important to the plot, it sucks that the entire episode is just one long, massive, uninteresting Scooby-Doo chase because they accidentally injure Rich Pigeon and spend the whole episode fleeing a massive flock of pigeons. That's it. I got nothing else on this, it's just filler. Ponyhead invites Star to visit her family. This is a bottom tier episode and don't be surprised if it's close to last place. Ponyhead is absolutely obnoxious here, and the episode and all the characters within are aware of that, including Star. She is absolutely awful here, displaying basically all of her worst qualities and effectively pissing off everyone present as well as the audience. The way she treats her family is just irritating, and even though her sisters are equally psychotic and not at all nice people, that only adds to how insufferable the episode is given 90% of the cast is an unlikable twat. The episode also serves no purpose beyond introducing Ponyhead's family, who only make like 1 or 2 more appearances after this. I don't care if the point was to make Ponyhead as awful as possible, because if that's the case, why is Star still friends with her? Why is she still showing up just to ruin other episodes with her mere presence? This character is a detriment to the quality of this entire show, and a season that's already a massive mixed bag.
Pretty please, H-Boo.
Oh, you know I can't resist your adult voice.
Okay, that's sus as fuck. I enjoyed this episode, and it does go a long way to make Hekapoo more likable, you know, ignoring whatever the adult voice thing was. And seeing her and Marco team up to go on adventures is a very fun concept that I wish we got to see more of. Ultimately, it turns out Marco had been withholding that the portals he and Hekapoo were closing were created by Star, who is currently still dreaming in her puberty form, which she doesn't take too kindly to. While the episode was fun, it mostly just exists to set up the next one. Deep Dive is one of the best episodes of the season, which is not really saying much I realize, but hear me out. Okay. Janet is here. Okay, I'm kidding, but her presence is always appreciated. Star ventures out to try and finally put an end to her puberty dreaming thing and find what it is she's been searching for in her sleep. She ends up in the literal realm of magic, which is cool enough on its own, but what was even cooler is seeing Marco actually using Star's wand as a last resort to try and save her. And now Star has complete control over her puberty form. This was a pretty sweet payoff of an episode, and it had a ton of really cool moments, but my main problem lies with Marco's cheek marks. This goes f***ing nowhere. At the end of the show, these cheek marks are just written off as happening due to exposure to magic and that they don't actually mean anything. And even then, it isn't properly explained. I doubt a lot of you even knew that was the actual canonical explanation, especially because the way the scene is written and the fact that we've only seen the cheek marks on Butterfly family members before and after this implies that this is a lot more important. And I honestly theorize that they had something interesting planned with this and then tossed it out. So a lot of the coolness of this scene has withered away over time. But that doesn't change the fact that this episode was pretty great. Monster Bash is also great. Star gets a party set up for Mumin and Monster youths to interact and get to know each other, and it actually goes incredibly well to start with. It's a big step forward for Mumin and Monster relations. However, things take a turn for the worse as not only does Miss Heinous crash the party, but Mina also returns and goes around capturing all of the monsters because she's a racist whack job. Then we get a massive bombshell reveal as Heinous' cheek marks open a nearby door containing several items from her childhood, with Mina quick to explain that Miss Heinous is in fact Queen Eclipse's daughter, Meteora, and that Heinous this entire time has been a member of the Butterfly family. Not gonna lie, as much as I've hated nearly every Miss Heinous episode up until now, this was such a good reveal. The suspense, the slow realization, everything is executed flawlessly, and after this episode, Heinous, now going by her birth name Meteora, is the main antagonist of the season. Monster Bash is a much needed palate cleanser and a really great episode. I have basically nothing to critique here. It's honestly in the running for one of the show's best episodes. And then we immediately go back to mid again, why not? This is the same kind of whiplash that the Magician episode in season 2 had, and in terms of quality, it's about on par. This is a Christmas special, and as far as Christmas specials go, this might unironically be one of the worst I've ever seen. The whole plot is mindless and uninteresting, everyone arguing and being at each other's throats was super forced, the whole episode just ending because the holiday itself ended at a specific time felt like a cop-out, and the best stump day ever line was like a terminal dose of cringe. Definitely skip this one. This episode is a much better Christmas special, but it's still not good. I really do not care about Star's spells. The one-off episode in season 2 was a fun change of pace, but it should have remained that way. I don't need more episodes about the spells. They aren't fleshed out enough as characters for me to care, and they have no impact on the plot. Next. Yet again, this is a waste of time. While I always appreciate the writers wanting to show Star and River bonding, nothing about this episode made me feel like it was justified or that it justified its existence, or made me feel like I'd actually experienced something from watching it. River is just messing around on this whole hunting thing the entire time in a series of very repetitive and predictable gags that don't land, and it's not as if this has any effect on the plot at all. Normally I wouldn't mind episodes of this show that are episodic, after all that was basically all of season 1, but the difference here is that not only are all these episodes low on energy and not funny, they also just feel like filler, and are being placed at super critical points in the story that demand more attention. See, look, this is more in line with what I was expecting. Eclipsa and Moon have their own adventure as they search for evidence to use for Eclipsa's upcoming trial. Moon and Eclipsa are both very different characters, and seeing their approaches to the situations they face clashing and watching their back and forths makes for a naturally entertaining episode while still delivering on the stuff that's significant to the plot. Having to uncover secret records that prove Meteora's existence in the royal family has been completely erased, and that someone or some people staged a massive cover-up, replacing all records of Eclipsa's daughter with Queen Festivia instead. I appreciate that the episode is constantly moving, and while it does take until the very end for any plot relevant stuff to happen, it still managed to be a fun watch just from seeing Moon and Eclipsa have to work together and avoid being detected by the High Commission. Eclipsa is finally put on trial, and the trial itself is about what you would expect given prior events. The High Commission being completely biased and trying to pass her off as evil. I hate these guys, and I think they are very poorly written, you know this already. But even with my frustrations in mind, this still ends up being a good episode. It is basically just an 11-minute court case without much else happening, but the return of the Truth or Dare cube adds a lot of extra tension, and seeing the High Commission finally get called out for their bullshit is great, as Romulus reveals that the High Commission did in fact get rid of Eclipsa's daughter, replacing her with Festivia, who happened to be a random human peasant. With both parties found guilty of crimes, Star, Moon, and Eclipsa reveal they conspired with each other in order to call the High Commission out for all their lies. And with this confirmed, they now know that Eclipsa is the rightful heir to the throne, and that for generations the Butterflies have actually been complete nobodies. Honestly, when season 3 is good, It is really good. There have been several bombshells dropped so far, and while yes, there's been a lot more bad episodes than I remember there being, and the writing isn't exactly rock solid, the execution of the payoffs are usually just as great as Season 2's. This whole episode obliterates so much of what we thought about these characters and the world building, and I think it's a really excellent way to subvert things. Ludo finally returns, and honestly, I really like this episode. It's the beginning of Ludo finally finding some closure and peace after losing everything time and again, and this episode itself is very off-putting. Ludo's brother Dennis finally tracks him down in a random location in space, and we see that Ludo's mental health has really gone down the toilet, building life-size dummies of his parents, generally being completely delusional, and overall you just can't help but feel disturbed yet really sad for the guy. Ludo is always a pretty easy villain to like and feel sorry for, so seeing him in this state and imagining what's currently going through Dennis's head seeing his brother like this is, well, it's a lot, and it just keeps ramping up as he realizes Ludo has gone completely insane. And yet Ludo still cares for his younger brother, and after watching him tear the dummies to shreds, reassures him that he'll be okay and that he's able to stand up against his parents. Not only that, but Ludo acknowledges that he needs to work on himself before he can come back from solitude. While this was definitely a very depressing and creepy episode, it's wonderfully written. I honestly think the episodes showing Ludo finally getting some closure are incredibly underrated, and in many cases I find them to be substantially better than what many people consider to be some of the season's highlights. There isn't a whole lot to this episode other than Buffrog leaving Muni with his kids because of the continued poor treatment of monsters, and that while he acknowledged that things are changing, it's not changing fast enough to make him consider staying. That's basically it. The episode speaks for itself and it's not bad, I just don't get why they made this into a whole episode instead of just letting people know Buffrog is leaving for like 2 minutes in a different episode. I think that would have been a far more efficient use of time, but like, yeah. Marco returns home and finds that in the time he was gone from Earth, his mother had gone pregnant. So of course the natural way to write an episode about Marco finding out he's going to be a big brother is to make it about a magical and cursed painting that looks like garbage and is slowly transforming Marco into the garbage painting. And then his parents have to take this quiz to save him and turn him back to normal. How did we get here through Marco's mom being Perginette? This episode feels like the writers just threw a dart at a dartboard, missed the dart entirely as it goes out the window and then landed on a painting that was lying in the trash, so they went, "Oh, urethra! That's what the episode is about." This is just not good. Next. This episode is about Ponyhead visiting St. Olga's. Wait, no, Meteora is here. The episode is good again, come back. Ponyhead is just Ponyhead, so not much else to add there. Meteora is slowly embracing her monster side, which is growing far more dangerous by the day, and also rips Ponyhead's horn off, so any complaints I previously had about Heinous are invalid. Thank you for assisting society. This episode is pretty great when it just focuses on Meteora, her viewing her earliest memories and getting more and more frustrated at the fact that Muni should have been hers to rule, killing St. Olga, who was basically her mother figure, and Gemini by ripping out his robotic heart. I mean, you gotta admire how fast they managed to turn this pathetic villain of the week into a legitimately intimidating threat and somehow not have it feel that rushed. However, I have some problems. As I mentioned way back in the season 1 section, I have a pretty big issue of how this show handles the monster racism allegory, specifically in relation to how they portray many monsters in the show as genuinely destructive or evil beings who will attack innocent people, and at many points classify some negative traits like Tom's anger issues and Meteora's violent tendencies as being natural monster traits. It also doesn't help that most, if not all, of the villains in the show have been monsters, and the humans and mutants have been the good guys. When the show goes into detail about the segregation and poor treatment of innocent monsters who don't go around being awful, it's obviously trying to show that it's a bad thing, and it is a bad thing. The problem is that time and time again, Star vs. the Forces of Evil presents monsters as being inherently dangerous. You can't write a story about the segregation and poor treatment of minorities when you constantly show the beings representing minorities are inherently dangerous. That is a completely counterintuitive allegory. It doesn't work. Of course, humans are going to be scared of monsters when they have been shown to be ultra powerful, ridden with anger, and generally an inherent threat to human life. If you give the oppressors in your allegory against racism and segregation a genuine reason to fear minorities, that is a shit allegory. It doesn't excuse the bigoted actions towards the monsters that aren't doing anything bad, but the problem lies in how often the show frames monsters as being evil. I mean, in one of Buffrog's solo episodes, he literally tries to hype himself up for a mission after being upset at leaving his kids by reaffirming to himself that he is evil. And the whole episode he's constantly trying to cover up that he's gone soft by proving that he's evil to his fellow monsters. How do you screw this up so badly? Why are you making being evil an inherent monster trait that the monsters themselves try to reaffirm when the entire entire point is that not all monsters are evil. I get that I've gone on a massive tangent, and it doesn't change the fact that this episode is mostly good, but I hope you can at least understand why I really dislike this show's main allegory and why it frustrates so many people. Star and Marco get locked inside a phone booth. Oh boy. Well, I mean, the cameo from Alex Hirsch is nice, and the episode seems cute overall. I doubt they're really gonna go in the direction that God damn it! Even though this was required to happen to get them out of the photo booth, this still blows my mind. Like, of all the ways to create more relationship tension, you had to force Star and Marco to kiss while Star is already in a relationship? It just feels so wrong. Not just on a storytelling level, like I genuinely feel disgusting having watched that happen. This was a very desperate attempt to manifest some relationship drama. Thank God Jackie got out of this mess when she did. Needless to say, this episode started quite the fire in the fandom overnight, and I don't blame anyone for freaking out over this. Many cheered it on because they were avid Starco shippers, while everyone else just stared at the screen and genuinely wondered what the f*** this show's problem was. Ponyhead gets another episode. Oh, and she gets her horn back. Moving on. This episode is fine. Seeing the aftermath of Meteora's destructive rampage throughout Muni is definitely a good way to set the tone. Oh yeah, and Eddie's here. Hello Eddie. I didn't mention him for the Bog Beast episode, but he was probably that episode's only saving grace. He's pretty funny and a welcome addition to the episode. Honestly, the main thing of note is Eclipsa finally coming face to face with her daughter and choosing to protect her over Moon. Unfortunately, this leaves Moon open to being blasted by Meteora, reverting to a form similar to Star's out-of-control Mubity form, and proceeds to flee to the realm of magic. Generally, the episode does a fantastic job of setting up the season finale and making the stakes seem far higher than they've ever been. Unfortunately, there appears to have been a change of plans. I really do not like Divide. It is a tone-clashing masterclass of not giving a f***, and it gets really annoying. The only positive part of this episode is Star encountering Moon in the realm of magic and both of them losing their memories while they're there. Otherwise, Divide is a completely unfocused mess that wants to spend most of its time telling bad jokes instead of pushing the story forward in a way that's exciting or accurately reflecting the tone it was established in the previous episode. The sense of finality is just completely gone, and the moments of drama we do get are completely at odds of how unfocused the tone is. Marco spends more time building a team out of his friends and being faced with multiple unfunny jokes than he does actually trying to stop Meteora. It's an incredibly sloppy first part of the season finale, and I'm starting to think a lot of episodes are rated this high on IMDb just because there's a handful of cool moments or brief fan service, or a moment related to the shipping or whatever. Come on. Thankfully, Conquer is a lot better, and I do think it's a solid season finale. Still has some issues though. The weird tonal clashes still persist throughout the first 2/3 of the episode. While the dramatic moments certainly pack more of a punch than previously, I do not understand why it was so hard for them to just focus on keeping the tone consistent. I get there's probably Disney mandates requiring there be jokes, and I'm not saying the episode has to be entirely humorless because that's just not a realistic complaint, but surely you get what I'm saying here. For a threat that's been built up to be more dangerous than goddamn toffee, I would expect the show to take it more seriously. With that being said, again, the dramatic moments are a lot more hard-hitting since characters are just technically getting killed left and right, and the final third of the episode is legitimately fantastic. The music is perfect, the dialogue is great, Meteora finally feels like a genuine threat after the previous episode refused to take the situation seriously, and while I'd hardly say the animation is mind-blowing, this is definitely the best fight scene the show has had since the first season, which is a bit depressing, really. Eclipsa coming in clutch at the end, finally showing how powerful her dark magic really is and being forced to kill her only child was both awesome and deeply heart-wrenching when you see her reaction. Although Meteora is a baby again, which I don't know how that happened, but hey, good for Eclipsa, I guess. And Star taking responsibility for her family robbing Eclipsa of her rightful place on the throne for generations, and handing the kingdom over to her was a great way to show how much she's developed and how mature she's gotten over the past 3 seasons. Also, Glossric revealing he wasn't actually brain dead for the past few months and was just trolling everyone was great. I love and hate this guy. And as Eclipsa leaves for the monster temple, she searches for and finds her husband, Globgor, imprisoned in Romulus's crystals, ending the episode. I seriously wish that the other 2/3 of Conquer and pretty much all of Divide was as insanely good as this. Imagine if they had a consistent tone and weren't too concerned with constantly telling jokes. This would easily be one of, if not the greatest pair of episodes in the whole show, if that was the case. Season 3 is a very divisive season, with many either loving what it brings to the table or hating the execution. And, big YouTuber cliche, I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't hate Season 3, but it is a massive mixed bag with a shocking amount of misfires and wasted potential and time. But it's contrasted by how insanely great the show is when it actually gets its act together and is properly focused. And unfortunately, as the show goes on for longer, that gets rarer and rarer. I will say now that Eclipsa and all of her lore is one of the best additions to the show, period. She's not only a fun character, but she's an incredibly compelling one. Being robbed of everything and demonized for generations just for wanting to live her life the way she wanted to, and for loving a man that, in all fairness, did kill a lot of people, that the human public and High Commission found undesirable. And her being proficient in dark magic, dangerous spells, and taking risks while not being a bad guy adds a lot of nuance to her character. Star's development throughout the season is also fantastic. At the same time though, it's sad to see how much the show is fumbling the most basic of ideas for episodes at this point. From assassinating characters to nonsensical plot points, tonal inconsistencies, the works, basically. Season 3 is not a bad season, but I find it difficult to really disagree with anyone who says it is. I guess it's just me being nice because I do like this show far more than I let on. Or maybe it's because I want to keep convincing people that there was a reason people loved this show for so long until season 4. Ah yes, Season 4, the moment where Star vs. the Forces of Evil's 4 years of goodwill was promptly flushed down the toilet. It's no secret that this season is pretty universally despised, at the very least the second half of it. It not only contains some of the most boring, pointless, and downright terrible episodes in the entire show, it also takes a complete shit over 4 years worth of storytelling in a record amount of time. Things may not start out that bad, but it goes downhill very quickly. Towards the end of this segment, I will probably end up repeating a lot of what I said in my original video reviewing the second half of Season 4 that I published nearly 5 years ago now, but I'll try and shake it up a little. But yeah, Butterfly Follies is a mostly inoffensive starting episode, but it has a few problems that really annoy me, like Star suddenly being super proficient in using magic with her hands all of a sudden. I get that there was a time skip, but this seems like a very useful ability for her to have that I would have liked to have seen her develop instead of just showing that she has it now. I also get that they need some way for her to do magic given she just gave her wand away to Eclipsa, but like, just show us when you learn this. Also really not a fan of how dragged out the pacing can be now. I've been content with the slower pace for the past 2 seasons, but 4 is just a really poorly paced season of television. Not so bad with this episode, but it's something to keep note of. Anyways, Star, Marco, and River are trying to find Moon after she disappeared, and Eclipsa is currently ruling Muni and trying to free Globgor. That's the gist of it anyway. I feel about the same with this episode as I do with the last one. It feels like it goes on for way longer than it does, and none of the jokes are very funny, and many of them are downright predictable. Ruberiot and Fulduke are here though, rather conveniently I may add, but it's nice to see them at least, not that we're gonna see them ever again. Star finds Moon, and after a little back and forth, eventually gets her to remember her old baking song, and it's a very touching scene as Moon's memories begin to come back. I don't really understand why this and the last episode were 22-minute specials. For a moment I thought all of Season 4 was gonna be 22 minutes, which is something I've been wanting for a while given how good previous specials have been, but no, after this they go back to 11-minute segments again. To be fair, Season 4 does have the most 22-minute episodes in the show, but when 2 of them are proudly displayed at the beginning of the season and about half of the runtime is just full of hot air, I don't get the sense the show is using its remaining time wisely. Not a whole lot to add with this one, it's just Moon slowly regaining her memories and trying to adjust to her new life now that she's no longer queen. We do see that her relationship with Eclipsa has considerably improved though, with the two now appearing to be close friends, but Moon still doesn't fully trust her, and it's like, she literally saved the entire kingdom in your absence and you still find it hard to just put a little trust in her? That said, watching Moon and Eclipsa properly bond was nice, and it's good that she's not constantly sussing her out anymore. Moon and River leave to go start a new life on their own, and that's about it for this episode. Oh boy, Romulus is back. This episode is really annoying. It's just Eclipsa and Romulus arguing and both being petty towards each other. Any remaining hope for Romulus as a character is basically gone. And the fact that he started all of this just because Eclipsa politely asked if he could free Globgor, especially because he and the High Commission spent generations tearing her family apart and demonizing her only to be proven wrong, is all kinds of pathetic. Did they ever actually intend for this character to get better? Why plant the seeds for it if you weren't gonna follow through with it? He hasn't changed at all and has gotten even worse. worse. And Eclipsa doesn't really help in this episode because while her anger towards Romulus and the High Commission is absolutely justified, she doesn't express it in a way that feels consistent with the Eclipsa we've come to know, coming off as more of a spoiled teenager. It's not very fun nor pleasant to watch, as I'm just watching the most annoying character in the show engage in a petty argument with a character who should absolutely know better. This one's okay. We finally get an adventure in the Never Zone with adult Marco again and get to meet Brunzetta, one of his former allies. They really should have used the Never Zone more. It's a concept that's just begging to be explored. This isn't exactly a mind-blowing episode or anything, but for a fun little adventure showing Marco's skills in the Never Zone, it's perfectly fine. This episode is also fine, though it is making me dread the upcoming relationship stuff in this season. It doesn't really feel like it's treading new ground for Star and Tom's relationship other than bringing up the fact that Tom knows about the kiss she had between Marco, and this upsets Tom's parents a lot. This doesn't really do anything but show how mature Tom has become. He doesn't lose his cool while explaining that he's upset Star didn't tell him, and I think that's worth noting. But overall, this has a very minimal impact on their relationship, and the episode just ends up feeling kinda pointless. Not bad though. Someone tries to assassinate Eclipsa, so Star and Marco go Sherlock and Watson trying to find the suspects. Scratch that, they're more Thompson and Thompson than anything else. This episode is just really boring, and it annoys me because Star and Marco trying to solve a whodunit relating to an assassination plot against Eclipsa is a fantastic idea, and yet nothing interesting happens. They just go around asking people questions with no creative twists, no magic. They learn nothing, nor do they actually learn who tried to off Eclipsa. We just end with Eclipsa playfully acknowledging that people hate her and that she wants to win their trust and respect over time, which is more so a strength of Eclipsa as a character than the episode itself. Star also going full Patriot act and locking up everyone who bought the berries used to assassinate Eclipsa felt very out of character. Not sure what they were cooking with this one. Sorry if I end up repeating myself a lot with these, but god, so many of these episodes are just boring. Moon and River set up a camp of their own until a random human family shows up after being kicked out of their home by monsters. Yeah, really handling that racism allegory delicately, aren't we? And over the course of the episode, they just drive Moon insane. And in all fairness, they aren't exactly making any compromises and are being a little obnoxious, and watching Moon lose her shit was funny, but I'm just bored to tears at what's happening here. The only interesting part is at the very end where Moon allows this family to live around them, and then another family shows up, implying that Moon and River are basically building a safe haven for anyone not happy with the current state of Muni. It's a neat idea, I just wish it was in a better episode. Fuck this episode. It feels like this episode took basically every unlikable aspect about Ponyhead and amplified them by 11 trillion. The Ponyhead show is just 10 minutes of Ponyhead being the most obnoxious piece of shit in the universe. And just because everyone in Muni is annoyed by her and her show as well, doesn't excuse it because you're still making the viewers watch this. I don't know a single person who even so much as smiled at a joke in this episode. And the whole point of this episode is that Star believes showing all of Muni what Eclipsa is really like will help increase her popularity and get everyone to like her. But because Ponyhead is just the absolute worst, she continues to make the whole show about herself and even hacks every phone in Muni so that the show is playing on all of them and they can't be shut off. The only real saving grace of this episode is Eclipsa's song, which is legitimately nice on the ears, but it doesn't save what is ultimately a complete waste of time, one of the absolute worst episodes of the show. If I had to show someone a single episode to express my genuine hatred of Ponyhead, it would be this one. You know, I'm starting to get the sense that Star is just subconsciously trying to sabotage Eclipsa's reputation at every turn. Not only with the whole George Bush holding everyone prisoner thing and the mere concept of her even humoring the Ponyhead show, but just in general, she is constantly doing way more harm than good to Eclipsa's reputation. While Eclipsa herself is not helping with this, nor really making much of an effort to improve her relations with her allies, Star just comes off as completely incompetent here. It takes her the entire episode to just use the all-seeing eye to find where Eclipsa was, and if she just did that from the start instead of stalling and constantly offending the spider bites with stuff that she has no actual knowledge of, then this entire fiasco could have been avoided. This episode is just painfully written. Quest by, and this happens to be the worst Quest by episode of the f***ing bunch. It's also thankfully the last. This one just drags on for so long. Star, Marco, and Jenna go to the Quest by going out of business sale and end up in the store's stockroom. In this stockroom is nothing until they imagine what they want. And this is the secret to how Quest by has everything in the universe anyone could possibly want. It's all made here by people's imaginations. This is a really cool concept that they could have done so much with, and yet instead it feels like the episode was written off as an afterthought. Most of this episode is just the characters standing around and waffling for ages, even with the main threat of the episode being that if they stay here and keep imagining everything they want, their brains will slowly fry up. There's no real urgency at all, and as the characters slowly succumb to the influence of the stockroom, it just feels like they were really trying to waste as much time as possible until they reached the limit and could end the episode. This is very much Season 4's equivalent to the Banachik incident. It has the exact same problem, just not nearly as bad as this. The Banachik incident still had some of Season 1's energy despite how nonsensical the episode was. This is just dreadfully dull. I really like this episode actually. It's a cute little episode between Marco and Kelly as they have an adventure in Kelly's home dimension. I think the show could have used more episodes where they travel to distinctly different dimensions like this, instead of just doing a miscellaneous thing on a different color planet that could have easily happened on Earth or something. While this episode is simple and charming, it does have one massive fatal flaw. The show is losing its grip on reality with the shipping, as out of absolutely nowhere, Marco and Kelly start a relationship. This feels super slapdash and is clearly another artificial way for them to get people to go crazy about the shipping, and given this is going to be completely dropped in a few episodes from now, it only shows how much of a desperate attempt this was. Marco and Kelly are at least cute together and get along really well, so it makes sense if you look at it that way, but I just can't see it any other way. Two in a row? Seriously? This is another 22-minute episode, and it's really, really bad. Star and Marco are suddenly being super awkward around each other again, and I gotta say that having this happen only a single episode after Marco hooked up with Kelly is certainly a choice, and it's eventually concluded that this is the work of the Blood Moon, which we have known for a while, and the characters should have known for a while too, and yet this is somehow still a shock to everyone. Then they spend an eternity actually getting to the point everyone cares about, which is removing the curse, and then at the very end of the recreation of the Blood Moon dance, they casually drop this line.
What if it was never the blood moon?
I'll get f***ed with this bullshit. The only purpose of this episode was to remind everyone that, curse or not, Starco will be endgame, and it's incredibly lame. I hate that this episode is a thing, not just because it wastes so much time actually getting to the plot point people actually care about, but because it is probably the most disrespectful way to tell anyone even remotely invested in the show's other relationships to go f*** themselves. Because the curse was never the problem. They just liked each other the whole time, completely independent of the curse. I'm not even invested in the show's trash fire relationship drama anymore, and I'm still miffed at this episode. And this is a 22-minute special for some reason, and most of that time is just fluff. This is time that could easily be spent elaborating on and making sure that the rest of the final season is solid and makes perfect sense, and they instead waste it on around 17 minutes of nothing, followed up by the stuff people actually want to see being at the very end. What an absolute waste of time, dude. Okay, I'ma just say it. The fact this episode is so criminally underlooked greatly offends me. This is one of the best episodes of the season to me and gives Ludo the closure he deserves. While still not in his right mind, Ludo is doing a little better for himself but finds himself falling back into his villainous ways, which keeps giving him painful reminders of his past. The whole episode consists of Ludo wanting to move on and not be reminded of his past failures and pain. Meanwhile, Dennis, though his intentions are completely pure, keeps accidentally reminding him of the parts of his life he wants to forget, rebuilding his old castle, hiring his old monster army to rebuild it, and eventually being told that the wand is currently owned by Eclipsa, which almost sends him into a downward spiral of scheming to get it back again. I love how Ludo desperately wants to move on and wants to get better, and his bond with Dennis is still incredibly wholesome. The ending is fantastic too. After Dennis realizes he's been scammed as the ownership rights of the castle go to the person who he signed a contract with after it's been rebuilt, and realizes that he's just given away his entire family fortune, Ludo dons his original outfit from season 1 and becomes the villain one last time in order to help out his younger brother. And after the situation with the contract is sorted, Ludo reconnects with his other siblings and gets them to help rebuild the castle, as he looks forward to a brand new and happy life living with Dennis. I genuinely love this episode. They didn't need to give Ludo a proper redemption arc and actual closure, after all the show has long since moved on from him, but I'm super happy they did, and of all the things this season manages to screw up when it comes to series long payoffs, I'm so happy that Ludo's story wasn't one of them. Mina finally returns, and now she is the main antagonist of the season. Nothing else in this episode really matters, or is it all that fun to watch. You really only need to watch the last third. Mina is still hellbent on wiping out all of the monsters and the monster sympathizers because again, she is a racist whack job, and is still blindly loyal to the butterfly family despite Moon no longer being queen. She also asks Moon to restart the Solarian program, started by Queen Solaria, which is the reason she's a super powerful warrior in the first place. I do like that they show Mina is clinging onto her loyalty to Solaria, but it also puts a lot of things into perspective and makes me question why Moon and basically everyone else is so against Eclipsa for her dark magic and acceptance of monsters, yet they were completely fine with a program that turned everyday peasants into magical super soldiers. Where's the resentment towards Queen Solaria exactly? Moon directly acknowledges that the Solarian program was made during a dark time in Muni's history, yet it's Eclipsa she still has a problem with. May I remind you, Eclipsa's most powerful and destructive spell is a literal last resort weapon used to defend the kingdom. I get that Moon has trauma relating to monsters after Toffee killed her mother and everything, but why is everyone just okay with Solaria and the Solarian program? Heck, if you read even deeper into the lore, you'll find that there are many other queens that have done objectively worse stuff than Eclipsa and have even more terrifying spells. So Moon's constant distrust towards her makes even less sense. Oh, and Mina was the one who tried to assassinate Eclipsa earlier, so mystery solved there. Moon refuses to help Mina and instead chooses to focus on herself, and that's where this ends. Again, a masterclass of the show not using its time effectively and in squeezing all of the actually interesting stuff at the very end of the episode. This episode is fine. It's mostly about how the human kids and monster kids don't care about their differences and can just have fun and play together, ending off with saying that the younger generation will make things better and that the current generation is garbage. Not exactly wrong, but I'd rather things got better like now. You don't have to use the things will get better eventually excuse. Have some f***ing balls for Christ's sakes. Yeah, it's a nice sentiment. I'm just really tired of stories doing this instead of actually using the power of fiction to show a good future to inspire actual hope, because instead they always just take the easy way out. I mean, Persona 5 is one of my favorite games of all time and they do this as well. It really gets under my skin. The episode is cute, I'll give it that. Ooh, this episode is a lot, and it is not great. I really don't want to get into just how much lore is dropped in this one episode, but it's a bit of a mess. Now, Glossaric having an episode of him babysitting Meteora is adorable. Love that. It's everything else I really don't like. This episode reveals that time travel was an essential aspect of the origin of the butterflies and the magic wand, as Glossaric had to be there at this exact point in time to give the first members of the butterfly family the original magic wand. Not only that, but Glossaric's time travel shenanigans show that he has pretty much orchestrated the events of the entire series. Again, he knows everything that's going to happen and everything that will happen, and he apparently time travels pretty frequently, given that he and Toffee seem to be pretty familiar with each other in the past. I won't get into how this version of time travel doesn't make any sense, because arguing about time travel in fiction is a fruitless endeavor. I will say that I do not like that it's involved at all in any capacity, and if you wish to analyze just how messy this makes the entire show, then be my guest, because I don't have time to get into that. This episode was just Glossaric fulfilling his duties and doing everything according to his plan, which is why he brought Meteora in the first place. However, if you know how the story ends, this episode is really stupid, and only further proves that everything in the entire show was just part of Glossaric's painfully long suicide mission. This episode sucks. The only part I liked was Marco finally being done with everyone's shit and finally showing that he's still actually a badass at karate. Everything else though sucks royally. Marco has to acknowledge that he can't stay on Muni forever because he has plans for college and also wants to be there for his little brother as he grows up. Hello? You had the opportunity to stay on Earth and visit Muni and Star of your dimensional sisters at any time you wanted, and instead you let the idea of being a knight go to your head so bad that you almost ruined your friendships and got dumped by the girl of your dreams. You deciding to permanently move to Muni was a stupid f***ing decision, because not only did you officially leave your school, which is going to make going to college very difficult and take far longer, but you also arrived and realized the one thing you blew up your life over turned out to be a lie. And now after finally committing to this dumbass choice of yours, you acknowledge that you want to move back? You have left Earth and can go anywhere in the universe that you want. There are infinite numbers of opportunities for you, and you still wish to conform to what is considered normal by human standards? What was even the point of this decision? It has done nothing but make you miserable and confused. All of this could have been avoided if you stayed on Earth and just used the f***ing scissors, you blithering dipshit. I am so sorry. I am having a hard time understanding what Marco actually wants or what the writers even want to do with him. This is a stupid and unnecessary conflict born from a complete writing oversight. God have mercy on my bloody soul. Eclipsa is kidnapped. Great start. Let's see where you go from here. You have gotta be kidding me. Ponyhead once again ruins everything. Not literally in the episode, she actually does help out quite a bit, but it doesn't change that her kidnapping Eclipsa just to make a spectacle out of it for the Ponyhead show, and not telling anyone about it when they were genuinely worried for her safety, was a garbage thing to do. While it did technically assist Eclipsa and make her slightly more popular given everyone was invested in making sure she was safe, Ponyhead is just such an unlikable character that it just doesn't matter. I genuinely hate that this character wasn't scrapped and forgotten about after season 2. She only continues to get worse as the series goes on, and I absolutely loathe every interaction she has with every character. Junk and Janet is a boring episode that legitimately wastes so much time that it actually feels like the show is taking the piss. Remember when I covered this episode in my original video on the show's finale? Yes, we're finally overlapping with that video, took me long enough. And I showed the opening scene with the time code to demonstrate just how badly the time wasting is. That clip is emblematic of this season's main problem. Aside from the fact that most episodes not focusing on the story until the very end are uninteresting and not funny, the show is dragging its feet at every conceivable opportunity to make these episodes feel way longer than they should, and trying to fill out the time slot. It's filler, but it's not necessary filler. This is the final season of the show, and given the infamous state of the show's ending, this time should be used effectively. I shouldn't have to sit through a minute of Tom texting Star and then watch an episode about Janet and Tom sledding in a giant boot, just to see the ending where Mina is building a bunch of mechs from the Solarian days. The same time-wasting problem applies to Star and Eclipse's subplot, as they spend an agonizing amount of time waiting for a meeting with the High Commission, only for them to not really say anything that justified the long wait. Just an awful episode, honestly. Wow, another episode about the spells inside the wand, only this time they're conflicting with Eclipse's spells. I care so much about these characters, yippee! Please just skip this one. This was an okay Marco-focused adventure, showing his bond with his Dragon Cycle gang and teaching Tom how to ride one. But any memories I have of this episode are completely washed out by the sudden reveal that Marco and Kelly just randomly broke up off screen. Not only proving that putting them together was a very desperate attempt to stir up conversations and shipping wars, but also showing just how far the relationship drama has fallen. What were they even thinking with this? The whole idea in the first place comes out of nowhere, and then you just discard it off screen along with making Kelly a complete dick to Marco as well? I just don't have the energy, dude. Okay, this one is really sweet. We are finally introduced to Eclipse's husband, Globgor, through a dream sequence Eclipse is having with him in his mind, as his physical body is still frozen. We not only see just how sweet of a person Globgor is and how much he worries about how the people of Muni think of him, and his desire to finally see his own daughter and Eclipse again, we also see just how strong Eclipse and Globgor's love is. Their song is incredibly sweet, and the end of the episode is honestly pretty heartbreaking. Eclipse is such a great character, man. I wish she had more episodes to herself. Oh, this episode sucks. I can't say they're wasting time with this one though, it uses its time pretty effectively. All of my actual issues stem from the writing and how the episode once again, tiringly, uses the High Commission to sabotage Eclipse and turn him into one-note racist douchebags. Romulus has also completely tested my patience as a character to the point that I am no longer upset that they've discarded his development from 2 seasons ago. I'm just frustrated that they keep using him. Romulus being the one to intentionally let Globgor out of his crystal to cause chaos is just not surprising at this point. It's just pathetically predictable. The Magic High Commission are a complete joke, and are utter shells of the characters they were originally introduced as. The only things worth noting in this episode is that it marks a turning point for both Eclipse's reputation, but also human and monster relations after all of Muni witnesses Globgor go to great lengths to protect his family, while still caring for Muni. And then it's just implied that this episode single-handedly ended the systemic racism throughout Muni, which feels very rushed, but whatever. However, they don't acknowledge the continued grudges and discrimination that are naturally going to remain in this society, which is a very important part that they should probably address, but they don't. Even more wasted time, even spending an entire minute dedicated to a talking broom voiced by Justin Roiland, and all of this uninteresting garbage just builds up to Star and Tom having an arbitrary relationship problem. I cannot stress how completely out of nowhere this decision was. The relationship writing has nosedived to such a degree that Tom can just get frustrated out of nowhere and just decide that he and Star have to spend some time apart. I have no more words for how bad this is. I just kinda want you all to soak in how they just spent an entire episode doing close to nothing only to end it with Tom taking time off. Star and Marco are finally back on Earth and we get to see Marco's little sister. Also, Jackie is here for a bit and has a girlfriend now, and a bunch of other side characters show up too. That is all the substance you're gonna get here because despite being only 10 episodes away from the big finale, the show would rather waste time doing a slice of life Earth episode about Marco eating tacos for 10 minutes so he can win a free shirt. No, that is not a joke, that's just the writing of this season. Sorry if I'm beginning to go through these episodes really fast, but that's because there's really not much to talk about anymore. A lot of the episodes are just pointless fluff. The beach day photo is a mystery that's existed for a while, and the show treated the photo itself with a decent amount of importance given this beach day was supposed to happen at some point in the future. Turns out the episode is just mostly Starco fan service while also bringing time travel into the mix, and I'm just gonna leave everything there honestly because I'm not debating time travel no matter how much I want to point out how none of this makes any sense. Meteora and Mariposa accidentally wandered into the Never Zone, and Star and Marco arrived to find them much older. I definitely wanted more Never Zone stuff, but this just ends up being a waste of time that adds nothing to the ongoing plot. The only thing worth talking about is that Hekapoo shows up out of nowhere to tell Star and Marco to stay off Earth because things in Muni are messed up right now, which is absolutely rich coming from one of the members of the most incompetent group of advisors in fiction, especially when she is talking to the two people that have routinely defended Muni from the forces of evil and are the closest allies to Eclipsa. And to further demonstrate how incompetent she is, Hekapoo is the only reason this episode happens, because she leaves her f***ing portal open in the same room where the babies are sleeping. This is how they end up in the Never Zone. What were you thinking? While the Never Zone itself is a cool idea, and it was interesting seeing the babies as teens, this adds literally nothing.
Star, I think we should break up.
Wait, why?
God, what is even happening anymore? I truthfully no longer care about this. I just find it baffling they thought this was a good idea. Anyway, magic and portals are no longer working for reasons that I'm not gonna even attempt to get into, so everyone is stuck on Earth. Things are not going well in Muni apparently, and our heroes are gonna do something about it probably. Okay, moving on. Jenna, as funny as she is not able to save this train wreck of a season. And this episode is, again, mostly a waste of time until the very end of the episode, where we finally see that sealed off well that Star and Moon brushed up against in the season 3 finale. And we learn that mutants actually descend from humans, a reveal that should be far more earth-shattering and impressive than it actually is. But no one actually gives a shit, and neither do I. In fact, I have a lot more questions as to how any of this makes a lick of sense or why there's even a mural of Glossaric here. I did like that we got a rare moment of Jenna completely losing her composure and showing a weakness for a change, finding it scary that she doesn't remember how she managed to get to Muni on her own, but this is very quickly glossed over and she doesn't open up like this ever again. In any case, this allows the gang to enter the realm of magic and find their way to Muni. There's not a whole lot to discuss here either. Can't say it wastes much time actually. It's a pretty straightforward episode showing the gang going through the realm of magic and attempting to safely travel to Muni. The only thing of note here is that Tom is left alone and he can't unbuckle his seatbelt and he's just kind of stranded there until the finale. Again with a f***ing high commission, dude. I'm so sick of seeing these guys, this time teaming up with Mina in order to take down Eclipsa, with only Hekapoo pointing out that Mina is far too insane to be given this responsibility. I'm not even gonna start on this, I'm just really tired of the high commission, and them not caring in the slightest about the fate of the monsters despite the majority of Muni being accepting of them shows just how far they've fallen from grace. Eclipsa also recognizes that the magic that has wounded Globgore is Solarian magic, magic made specifically with the intent of killing monsters. We're about to blitz for the next few episodes as we approach the finale, by the way, as I'm legitimately running out of things to say here, and many of these episodes are still super boring in ways that I've already explained. I will say that compared to the season 3 finale, the tone here is far more consistent and appropriate given the situation. Everything feels appropriately dire and the action scenes, while stiff as ever, do have enough dramatic flair to convince you that this is indeed leading up to the show's finale. I also like that they actually do give Jenna stuff to do in the finale, and seeing her actually take a situation seriously for once is a nice change of pace that I really appreciate. And I'd say that out of the final 5 episodes, this is probably the best one, and I won't deny that seeing Eclipsa use her most powerful spell was hype as hell, and the chant itself is kick-ass. Unfortunately, for a spell that powerful to work, it takes a lot of energy, and Eclipsa used it on only one of the soldiers. This episode's about on par with the last, but still incredibly average. The only real saving grace of this episode is Starko finally being confirmed at the end, which was a cute scene and all, but honestly should have probably been reserved for the finale given everything else currently going on. And still, even when they are at the finish line, the show is finding new and impressive ways to waste time on stupid jokes. Not to the extent season 3 did, but it's particularly egregious here because this is it. This is the end. Then towards the end of this episode, we find out that Moon has had Mina working for her the entire time. Oh my god, I can't believe this! I am still mad! This is the only scene in the show that legitimately gets under my skin. It's such a brain-bustingly stupid plot twist, and I know the next episode calls Moon out on this, but how much of a dumbass do you have to be to enlist the help of a mentally insane Sailor Moon knockoff just because you want to have the throne back? Especially to the extent of giving random humans the same power as Mina? And this is after Moon already declined Mina's offer and began focusing on herself and staying out of the conflict. This twist absolutely assassinates Moon's character, and only continues the show's trend of baffling writing decisions. For starters, we finally get a backstory from Mina that shows how she met Queen Solaria when she was still a Mumin peasant, and then decided to devote her life to her goal of killing all the monsters in Muni. While it is a very quick flashback, it gives just enough context to be worth adding to the episode, especially with how Solaria specifically saw the conviction in her eyes and made her the first of the Solarian warriors. Other than that though, this is not a particularly great episode. Star is understandably heartbroken because of Moon's betrayal, and Moon states that if Eclipsa surrenders the throne to her, she will tell Mina to stand down and will heal Globgor and the other monsters of their wounds. This is such a bizarrely stupid plan on Moon's part. She knows how devoted Mina is to Solaria. She's known Mina for basically her entire life, and only recently had an encounter with her where she refused to stand down. And there's also the fact that she is like literally insane. Why she thinks this is possibly a good idea or that Mina will actually stand down is beyond me. She has done nothing but make things worse in a desperate attempt to reclaim the throne. I don't care if she says she's doing it to stop the madness or that it's for the greater good. This one action completely annihilates her character, and it's just straight up awful writing. And what do you know, Mina doesn't back down and insists on killing all of the monsters and monster sympathizers. In response, Moon attempts to strip her and all of the Solarian warriors of their powers that she gave them, and then nothing happens because they've all pledged their loyalty to Solaria. Ignoring how this doesn't make any sense, Moon basically gambled on being capable of taking Mina's power away, not even knowing for certain if she was able to do so. She completely doomed the entire monster population and her family over a f***ing gamble. God, this character sucks. Anyway, then Hekapu saves everyone. Hekapu takes everyone to the tavern at the end of the multiverse, where she plans to lay low until everything on Muni has blown over. Glossaric is just in the tavern for some reason, and Star enters his eye to confront him. While this is happening, Moon and Eclipsa play pool and go over the things Moon did off-screen that impacted the story, which is very, very jarring, and how she was basically playing both sides of the war by helping both Mina and Eclipsa. It then goes to some flashbacks that could act as some helpful exposition, and could show Moon's reasoning for why she did what she did, and could allow us to have some sort of understanding for her and make her likable again. Or at the very least, again, just understandable as a character, but it cuts off every time they go into a flashback. We get no information or anything. We're just given unsatisfying and frustrating glimpses of what could have been a better episode. But that's not the worst part. Star's character does a complete 180 and she just randomly decides she hates all magic and wants it destroyed. Not once throughout the entire series do we get a hint at Star going against magic and vowing to destroy it. Sure, she's been through hell because of it, but you need to show it having an effect on her. She's been fine with magic throughout the show. It was the royal being a princess stuff that she hated, along with all the recent family drama, but apparently this is a good idea all of a sudden and the only idea they can go with. My guess is that they were going to show some sort of character moments of Star gradually losing it with magic and being frustrated by its existence, and that can work if done correctly, but I guess they just forgot to do that. Star confronts Glossaric and concludes that destroying the magic is the best idea they have, but that Marco won't be with her as he isn't in her tapestry. Also, just a nitpick, why the hell does this tapestry show Star using magic if it is meant to be after the magic is destroyed? In fact, why is this a tapestry of her when Eclipsa is the queen? Star isn't even a princess anymore. This episode sets up the finale all well and good, but it comes at the expense of nothing making any sense anymore. We're finally here, one of the most infamous endings in animation history. Hekapu makes her last appearance by not showing any genuine care towards anything. May I remind you that this is her last appearance. All of that time we've used up getting to know this character and she's just written out of the show. Very cool. Marco takes the wand and transforms it back into his wand from that one season 3 episode, and they all go to the magic dimension where they find that Tom has been completely corrupted after he was left there. Marco goes to take care of Tom, and Star finds out that pudding is the only thing that can stop everyone from losing their minds in the magic dimension, because Glossaric. And apparently Marco just has a lot of it for some reason that's never actually elaborated on. We don't see Glossaric giving him that, we don't see him like storing pudding in advance, he just has a lot of it under his hoodie, you know. Writing is hard, alright? Writing is very hard. Star, Moon, and Eclipsa put their hands in the magic and do the whispering spell, which begins to kill the magic. And then Ghost of the previous queens show up and start smiling. I don't know why they are smiling. Why are they here? They're destroying the magic, something they live with their whole lives. There is no reason for them to be smiling. They don't even know what's happening. Are they all just suddenly on board with getting rid of the magic? Not explained at all. On Muni, the Solarian warriors are preparing to commit genocide and have rounded up all the monsters with the goal of pushing them all off a giant cliff. River tries to hide and heal Globgor, but Mina finds them, only to go to the magic sanctuary and enters the magic dimension. And this is really stupid given how hell-bent Mina was on killing this guy. Just completely ignores him and immediately guns it for the magic dimension. You've got your main target in your sights being healed and you just walk past him. I thought the entire reason you went out here was to find Globgor so you could make the feeling of pushing all the monsters off the cliff feel complete. And now you're just gonna ignore him? Fine. Why should I care about these characters at this point? Everyone in this show is a complete idiot. Mina finds Star and the Queens destroying the magic and goes to attack them. But then here it comes. Mina is attacked by one of the corrupted mill horses. Oh, it's here. And it somehow overpowers her and drowns her in the magic, completely taking her out of the story. To this day, this is still one of the funniest and most ridiculous ways I have seen a villain die. It is such an anticlimax. An all-powerful being who has been built up all throughout the season. The main antagonist, someone who Moon, Eclipsa, and Star couldn't defeat and take care of, was defeated by a f***ing mill horse. Was this supposed to be played for laughs? It is so awful. The main antagonist doesn't even get a fight or a satisfying comeuppance. Even though each season finale has gotten progressively worse, one thing they've all had in common is delivering a satisfying end to the main antagonist of the season. Here, they couldn't be bothered, so they just let her get jumped by a horse. What is reality? Also, Marco manages to bring Tom's sanity back, but shockingly gets stabbed through the chest. Now, this shocked a lot of people when it happened, and the way they had Marco cover it up told me that something bad would happen to him. Even throwing around the idea of killing Marco is very bold and a very welcome and risky choice in my book. Unfortunately, this isn't my book, this is Darren Nefzi's, so it doesn't really mean anything. Marco was stabbed, but he feels completely fine. No pain, limping, or any of that, he's just fine. This show is so well written. Star, Eclipsa, and Moon managed to destroy the magic once and for all, prompting Glossaric to show up and for the first time in the entire series, sounds genuinely happy and proud of everyone's efforts. This is because he's wanted this to happen the entire time, and his time travel shenanigans and knowing how everything was going to play out is proof of this. Glossaric had the ending of the show set in stone the whole time and wanted to see it through, meaning that Glossaric's entire plan from far before the beginning of the series was to die and take the magic with him. It was a suicide mission. While this does add some more nuance to possibly hint that Glossaric was unhappy or truly believed that magic's existence was for the worst, this is an incredibly lame payoff. Then Star and Marco are forcefully separated before Star jumps back down the well to go find Marco. The two then exchange their love for each other here in a scene that would be heartbreaking and emotional if they didn't already go ahead and confirm Starco 2 episodes before. Think about how better this scene would be if they confirmed Starco here. It would be a lot more impactful. Then Star and Marco's cheeks light up and the magic dimension is destroyed. After this, Star ends up in the river somehow, and Moon brings her to the shore, where they find that everyone is okay. There's no telling how much time has passed, but seeing as the monsters are still on the cliff, I can say it's probably been at most like half an hour or something. And apparently, Globgor has been healed along with everyone else. I find it a little hard to believe everyone was healed in that amount of time, especially because many of them were near death and one of them literally exploded, but alright. Also, yes, Glossaric is dead because he himself is magic, so that means the Magic High Commission are all dead as well, including Hekapu. Does anyone seem to care? Nope, not at all. No one cares. That's just so wrong. The Magic High Commission get their characters completely assassinated. Hekapu gets a few seconds of screen time for her final appearance, and then dies alone at a random tavern. No heartfelt goodbye or anything. Romulus and Omnitraxus' deaths are treated as a punchline to a lame joke, and no one cares that they're dead. And here's the real kicker that you're all probably familiar with by now. The removal of magic retroactively destroys all magical beings in the universe. While the number is unspecified, and given the fact that Ponyhead is unfortunately still alive, the definition of magical creature is a little loose. This means that in order to prevent the genocide of the monsters, Star opted to genocide an unspecified number of magical beings that likely greatly outnumbers the monster population on Muni. I won't dwell on this for long because you've all heard it by now, but this is such a f***ed up oversight. Mina is also somehow still alive, but doesn't have any powers now, and everyone just lets her get away. This is the final fumble of the show's racism allegory. Remember how Toffee's motivations were tied to him being a monster and therefore part of an oppressed group of people, and how after his acts of villainy he is immediately killed? Well, here's Mina, an oppressor and psychotic killer, being allowed to walk free after her acts of villainy, and no one attempts to stop her. The oppressed got vaporized, and the oppressor walks away a free woman. It's utter garbage. Then suddenly, a massive portal appears out of nowhere. There is no explanation as to why this is here or what caused it. Marco wakes up on Earth along with Jenna, who admits she's actually a friend to Marco, as if this was supposed to be a satisfying conclusion to a character arc she never had. Marco and Jenna notice the same portal in the distance. Marco and Star and both their worlds run towards this portal until it eventually explodes. Marco then wakes up to find that this explosion has somehow fused Muni and Earth together, a decision that to this day melts my brain. He sees Star in front of him and they both walk towards each other, they both say hi to each other, and then it cuts to black and ends the episode. And that's the end of Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I don't need to say much here, this finale is still just as bad as it was 5 years ago. Honestly, I didn't think this was possible. Season 4 is somehow worse than I remembered it being, and I already wasn't very fond of this season to begin with, but it cannot be understated how much of a tragic misfire this entire season was. Actually, good episodes are scarce, and instead you're subjected to a fine assortment of some of the worst episodes in the whole show. While there are other episodes in previous seasons that are worse than some of the ones in Season 4 is just so consistently delivering bad episodes that it makes it worse by default. Notice how towards the finale I started blitzing through the episodes? That wasn't me being lazy, I was genuinely just finding it hard to talk about them without coming off as a broken record. I didn't even get into just how many plot holes and contrivances there were in this season, and I don't think I want to. This is such a depressingly bad ending, and I think it's worthy of its infamous reputation. It throws 4 years worth of storytelling and character development completely out the window, in favor of a time-wasting final season that suddenly rushes everything way too fast towards the end. I may have made this video to remind people that this show was once pretty good, and I want to justify why I still like it to this day, but the final season just cannot be ignored. If you made it this far into the video, this doesn't apply if you skip to the end, then genuinely thank you. This project was utter hell to write, as I haven't really done a proper ranking video like this before, and I'm aware that this is probably a lot messier than other ranking videos, but I wanted to try and give this a shot of a show I have a long history with, especially with how important it is to the growth of my channel. My original video on the Star vs. finale is about to turn 5 years old this year. 5 years since I had my first big break on YouTube. I wanted to make this video because, again, I do like Star vs. overall, and I have a lot of fond memories of it, and I wanted to remind people that there was a reason many were fans for so long, but having to talk about the series' low points was inevitable, and I was surprised at how annoyed they still made me feel to this day. Not to the point of genuine anger, mind you, but it was definitely interesting. Anyway, enough yapping, it's time for the ranking, starting from the bottom and going all the way up to the top. Just gonna clarify something real quick. Given how many of the bad episodes are super similar in quality, especially in Season 4, I mostly went off how much I enjoyed an episode when I had a tough decision to make. If you feel an episode should be slightly higher or lower compared to others, then that's probably why. I would have loved to have ranked all of these in a way that shows a consistent quality increase, but given that a lot of the bad episodes share a lot of problems, it just made way more sense to have enjoyment be the deciding factor if I was stuck on one for too long. Feel free to agree or disagree in the comments, I guess. Anyway, here we go. Starting off with The Ponyhead Show, Out of Business, Ponymonium, Death Peck, Doop Doop, Heinous, Cleaved, Pizza Thing, Bamboy Patty, I hope I said that right, Collateral Damage, Goblin Dogs, Sophomore Slump, The Night Shift, Curse of the Blood Moon, Sad Teen Hotline, Brita's Tacos, Junkin' Jenna, Fetch, Swimsuit, Yada Yada Berries, The Bog Beast of Bogaba, Down by the River, Ready Aim Fire, Pizza Party, Scent of a Hoodie, Lint Catcher, Gift of a Card, Trial by Squire, Red Belt, All Belts Are Off, Surviving the Spider Bites, The Banagic Incident, Trickstar, The Tavern at the End of the Multiverse, Queen Napped, Divide, Booth Buddies, Meteora's Lesson, Stump Day, Marco Jr., Naysayer, A Spell with No Name, Holiday Special, Mama Star, Ghost of Butterfly Castle, Shenanigans, Crystal Clear, Here to Help, Club Snubbed, Beach Day, Butterfly Follies, Escape from the Pie Folk, Gone Baby Gone, Starfari, Star vs. Echo Creek, By the Book, Battle for Muni, Puddle Defender, Royal Pain, Is Another Mystery, Spider with a Top Hat, Moon Remembers, Cornball, The Bounce Lounge, Interdimensional Field Trip, Pixtopia, A Boy in His DC 700XE, Lake House Fever, Is Mystery, Rest in Pudding, Tough Love, The Other Exchange Student, Mr. Candle Cares, The Right Way, Diaz Family Vacation, Battle for Muni, Toffee, Stranger Danger, Starstruck, Girls Day Out, Ransomgram, Just Friends, Battle for Muni, Book Be Gone, Kelly's World, On the Job, Monster Arm, Cheer Up Star, Friend Enemies, Camping Trip, Baby, Star Sitting, Lava Lake Beach, Hungry Larry, Muberty, Princess Turdina, Matchmaker, Nightlife, Lobster Claws, Party with a Pony, Battle for Muni, Marco and the King, Demonsism, Battle for Muni, King Ludo, Game of Flags, Marco Grows a Beard, Wand to Wand, Total Eclipse the Moon, Munipendence Day, Star on Wheels, My New Wand, Quest by, Sleep Spells, Star Comes to Earth, Schooled, Battle for Muni, Return to Muni, The Hard Way, Raid the Cave, Running with Scissors, The Monster and the Queen, Sleepover, Britney's Party, Fortune Cookies, Sweet Dreams, Deep Dive, Conquer, St. Olga's Reform School for Wayward Princesses, Storm the Castle, Butterfly Trap, Ludo in the Wild, Blood Moon Bowl, Face the Music, Into the Wand, Freeze Day, Monster Bash, Ludo, Where Art Thou, Princess Quasar Caterpillar and the Magic Bell, Battle for Muni, Moon the Undaunted, School Spirit, Bon Bon the Birthday Clown, and Star Crushed. Is that everything? I think that's everything. Honestly, as much as I wanted to make this video to remind people that this show was once beloved for a reason and that it was still overall a good show, I simply forgot how many episodes of this show were mid to straight up bad. While the majority of the show is still decent to genuinely great, the show's consistency basically vanished after season 1. Even though future seasons often had episodes that were far greater than the ones in season 1 is still my favorite because there was very rarely an episode that I disliked. And while most of the season consisted of 7 out of 10 episodes, well, that meant most of the season was good, especially given most of the remaining episodes were even better. I tend to value consistency over everything else with very few exceptions. It's why despite a few episodes in other seasons being worse than some of season 4's output, the vast majority of season 4 was unremarkably enjoyable and painful to watch, and it's why I consider it to be worse as a whole. For reference, I gave each episode in the show a rating out of 10 and color graded them based on a number. So 1 to 2 out of 10 would be dark red, 3 to 4 would be red, 5 to 6 would be yellow, 7 would be light green, and 8 to 9 would be dark green. There are no episodes in the show that I give a 10 out of 10 score, sorry. This is what season 1 looks like, and you can see that I think pretty highly of it from here. Here's what season 2 and 3 look like. While definitely far more inconsistent than season 1, I still think season 2 is a good season given it doesn't have as many consistent low points as season 3 does, which resulted in season 3 being a bit of a mixed bag for me. Then we get to season 4, and yeah, it's not pretty. While I will never say that my way of judging or reviewing things is perfect or whatever, I'm still learning as I go, honestly. I really appreciate and value the consistency of season 1. I also like season 1 because there's just so much charm and a lot of zany, cartoony energy that the other 3 seasons just don't have. And combined with it easily being the funniest and having significantly better animation and action scenes, it's not a mystery why I prefer it over the other seasons, even if they too have some exceptional episodes. When I think of Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Season 1 is what comes to mind, and I think Season 1 truly embodies what the show is, or at the very least what it used to be. Star versus the Forces of Evil. I don't mind the slower paced, more drama heavy approach of the other seasons on paper. It has shown time and again that it can work to great effect, but I just don't see why they had to forsake the show's original identity. While it helps to prevent the show from feeling formulaic, which was a problem in season 1, was it really that hard to take the story seriously while still delivering experiences similar to season 1? Star on Wheels in season 2 is proof that they could do it, but it ends up being an exception in the overall season. Regardless, I still hold both season 1 and 2 in high regard, and while I find season 3 to be very mixed in terms of quality, it still has a lot of standout episodes that make up for it. Season 4 is just not salvageable. There were only 9 episodes out of the 37 in season 4 that I found ranged from okay to great, and only 2 out of those 9 happened to be the great ones. No matter how many excuses I give this season, it was a generational fumble, a masterclass in wasting valuable time for no good reason, and then completely half-assing the conclusion, not even mentioning the number of plot holes, contrivances, and the sheer weight of the show's racism allegory crashing down in a blaze of agony. And it's unfortunate that the ending has left such a stain on the show's reputation, because I still found the show to be enjoyable on a rewatch, and at many points it rivaled some of the best of the Disney Channel's catalog. Although the final season and ending still frustrate me to this day, I can't let go of how much I like this show, and there's still a part of me that misses it after 5 years. Star vs. the Forces of Evil is a show of a lot of high points and low points that can easily throw people off, and honestly, I've accepted that. This is my first ever ranking video of an entire TV show, so I hope you can forgive parts of this video for feeling messy. I promise I'll get better. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Play Yakuza or something.